Well, what a great turnout. Thank you all for coming out today. You blew out our expectations. We're getting 60 more chairs, but I'm really impressed, so thanks for coming. A lot of people are concerned about things going on in our community and more broadly too, and so I appreciate that. I want to, before we get into the meat of this, I want to make sure we recognize a couple people who are here. First of all, our Mount Vernon District Supervisor, Dan Stork, is right over here. Your Mount Vernon School Board member, Karen Corbett Sanders, is also here. And I always forget to do this, and so I promised I'd do this at the beginning. But first of all, our legislative aides are here, who helped set this up today. My legislative aide, Nadine Slocum. Nadine, wave your hand. And Senator Ebbin's aide, Chris Land, is here. Where's Chris?
He might have been silent.
Oh, he's outside, Sergeant Glenn. Okay. And then Paul's aide, Thomas Bowman, is here, right there. Just so you all know, these are the state gives us an extremely limited budget for staffing, and these are the folks that sort of make us look good. And whenever you guys email us, they're the ones that respond and deal with your problems. And so they're the backbone of our operation, and they're make sure if you need anything, go talk to them. They're the first ones you'll talk to when you try to reach us. But I want to talk about a couple things more broadly, first of all, and then I'm going to get into, I'm going to talk about sort of more broad issues, and then I'm going to talk about my legislative agenda, and then I'm going to hand it over to Paul, and then to Adam. So a couple things. First of all, we have a state budget we're duking out. This year is a short session. In the odd year, we do a short session. In the even year, we do a long session. So our session this year is 45 days long. We have about 2 weeks left. We do a 2-year budget in Virginia. So we do our big budget in the long session, and then when we come back after a year, we do our short session, and we do changes to the budget and adjustments. This year, the revenues didn't come in as we had projected, and so we've sort of been in a cutting mode. Originally, we thought we were going to have to cut about $1.5 billion out of the budget. Turns out, I think it's been less than that because the revenues have come back some in the last 4 or 5 months. But we're still in a cutting mode. Notwithstanding that, we did find some room for new spending. I'm pretty sure the new, at least the Senate budget amendments proposed, I think about $25 million new dollars to Fairfax County, I think, as compared with the prior budget. I think, I'm not sure, but I think most of that, this is all just given us to us a couple days ago, but I think a large part of that is because the Senate budget amendments have a 2% pay raise for teachers in them. So, unfortunately, Paul's colleagues in the House didn't see fit to put that in their budget, but not Paul's fault. There's also a 3% salary raise for most all state employees. Our state employees have seen like 1 or 2 pay raises in like 8 years. And so they desperately need that. We've been actually losing a lot of state employees because of that. It's only a 2% raise for faculty in our budget. I'm not sure if Paul's budget works. His is a little different, but we have a lot of George Mason faculty in Northern Virginia, and then there's others around the state universities, and they're kind of a different budget system. And then we had big raises for our state police. Right now, starting state trooper salaries, I think $36,000. So. Thank you. Yeah, we got to get our state police paid better. The starting salary right now is $36,000. We're raising that to $43,000 in the Senate budget. I'm not sure about the House budget. $7,000 in the House budget. Okay. Yeah, state police have been hemorrhaging people like crazy. Taxpayers, you guys invested about $55,000 to get a state trooper trained and through the academy ready. They do a 3-year commitment, and a lot of them do their 3 years and take off. They can go down to Texas and make $65,000 starting off, or they can get trained by the state and go to Fairfax or Prince William or Arlington or whatever and make a big raise. And they've been doing that, and we can't keep that up. It's just not good for taxpayers or anybody. Our troopers deserve better than that. And then the Senate budget restores more higher education funding. I think about $125 million. I think the House budget restores some too, but does it in sort of a more targeted manner, I think. But higher ed has been taking it on the chin for years. We made some big investments last year. The governor had to claw some of it back because of the shortfall, but I think we've restored some of it in the amendments we've seen. But the whole higher ed thing is a whole other mess, which we can, if anybody wants to bring that up, I'd love to talk about it. I think UVA is sitting on $2.1 billion of cash while they raised the tuition by 50% over 10 years is outrageous. So we need to we're going to be looking at higher ed over the next year or two because of some of the things that have gone on. And next, I'm going to talk about my legislative agenda. Adam, I think, is going to cover some broader things, and Paul too, and they're going to talk about their bills. If you picked up a copy of my legislative agenda, it's there on the front table. It looks like this. I introduced 40 bills this year and about 10 budget amendments. The way it works in Richmond is we go for half the session, we work on our own bills, the House works on theirs, the Senate works on theirs, and we do what's called crossover. And then we can only work on House bills, and the House of Delegates can only work on Senate bills. And we had crossover on, was it Tuesday? Wednesday? Tuesday. Tuesday we had crossover, so now we're crossed over. I have about 22 of my bills made it out of the Senate or into the House right now. So far none have been killed, but that will change on Monday. A couple of the ones I want to highlight for you really quick. First of all, let's see. Okay, page 5. And I think Adam's going to talk about this one also because he had some legislation about this. The very first one listed Senate Bill 818. It has to do with the Alexandria sewer. So I guess for about 5 years now, I've known that the city of Alexandria has been discharging raw sewage into the Potomac River. They have a sewer system that dates back to around 1900, and back then it was state-of-the-art to take street water and toilet water and just throw it in the river as fast as possible. And the city's been trying to correct this over the last, I don't know, probably 2 decades, but they've been making very slow progress. About 7 or 8 years, the EPA came to, there's like, how many, 800 CSOs? 800 nationwide, yeah. They're called CSOs, Combined Sewer Operations. There's about 800 of these around the United States. Alexandria is actually pretty small compared to most of them. They have in Chicago, Philadelphia, New York. But the biggest one around here is actually DC. And DC is spending billions of dollars to fix the Anacostia and all that. Because EPA basically came down and said, everybody needs to fix it now, because somebody sued them under the Chesapeake Bay Protection Act and said, you got to start actually doing something. And so Alexandria, for about the last 5 years, has been taking steps to try and figure out how to fix their plan. They have 4 pipes that spew into the Potomac into Great Honey Creek. And they came out with a plan last fall to fix 3 out of 4 pipes. The 4th pipe goes into Orinoco Bay, that's just above King Street. There's like a little park there. And that pipe puts in about 130 million gallons of raw sewage every year. Every time it rains more than 1/10 of an inch, raw sewage goes in.
Mr. Duran,
so anyways, me and Paul and Adam had a bunch of meetings over the fall trying to figure out what we could do to move the thing along on that 4th pipe. The city kind of sort of gave us answers, but not really clear ones. So I introduced a bill, and Adam introduced a bill. Mine basically said they have 10 years to fix it. Adam had a bill, and then Dave Albo had a bill. Delegate Albo, he's got Mason Neck, he put in a bill, and Scott Lingenfelter, chair of the Chesapeake Bay Commission, put in a bill. And then Richard Stewart, who's the chairman of the Agriculture Committee, just south of us, he put in a bill. And first week of session, or second week of session, we passed the bill out of the Senate that basically says Alexandria has 8 years to get that last pipe fixed. That bill is now in the House. The House passed a different version, kind of goes that in a different direction. My guess is we're going to be negotiating that over the next 2 weeks and resolving it, but either way, I'm pretty sure Alexandria is going to be under sort of state restriction requirement to get that last pipe plugged up in the next decade. That's my suspicion. So we have more seats up front if everybody needs at this new table here, over here. So that I'm really excited about that. I'm glad we're going to get. I think we're going to get that done. So. Number 2, coal ash. So, thanks. As Delegate Albo put it to me, I said, I was talking to Dave about it, and I was like, I said, do you want to talk about the specifics of the Clean Water Act? He's like, no, this is real easy. It's just poop in the water. So anyways, number 2, coal ash. So, coal ash is a huge problem. There's 500 coal ash dumps around the country. They've been breaking, coal ash is the stuff that's left over after you burn coal. And historically, utilities would just dump in these ponds. And once this stuff is in the ponds, it leaches out really good stuff like arsenic and lead, boron, chromium. It's good for your complexion. And actually, more seriously, we have 5 of these. Four coal ash dumps in the Chesapeake Bay watershed, 2 outside. One of them is in Dumfries, just south of us. And there are 120 acres of coal ash dumps, ponds. So think about that for a second, 120 acres containing about, I think, 3 or 4 million cubic yards of this stuff. And it's been sitting there since the 1940s, it started in the 1940s. They stopped burning coal in the early 2000s. There's now 12 of my constituents who live down there whose groundwater wells are polluted. And Dominion just agreed to hook them up to public water because their water is so toxic. Then there's other sites in Virginia. For example, in Chesapeake, they actually built an island out of coal ash in the middle of the river. And then they built a coal ash pond in the middle of the coal ash island. And then they built a whole golf course on top of coal ash. And at the Chesapeake facility, south of Richmond, Dominion decided it was a really good place to dump a big coal ash pond in the middle of the river. So the James River used to meander, and in the middle of around the turn of the century, they cut some channels through it so that to make the river shorter, you know, so the river's straighter. And one of the old oxbows, they put a big coal ash pond dump right in the middle of where the river used to run. And so down there, it's leaching stuff out. In Chesapeake, it's leaching stuff out. In Buckingham County, it's leaching stuff out. So I have a bill that basically says Dominion has to provide us a bunch of information before the Department of Environmental Quality issues final permits. Because basically what they want to do is just put a big rubber top on and leave it there, sitting there forever. And my bill actually passed the Senate 29-11, but I have a House committee meeting on Monday, and I'm not optimistic. It was not sent to a happy place. We'll see what happens with that. I'll tell you that I've been talking with Dominion about it for the last month and a half, and Dominion really wants to do something. They're just having all kinds of internal squabbles about what to do. They announced a $200 million charge against earnings about a week ago because of coal ash. Their stock price went down 10% as soon as it happened. And it's a problem for them as well as for the entire community. I mean, this is a major environmental liability for that corporation, and it's something they got to deal with. And I was hoping my bill would give a structure or framework to deal with it, but the company doesn't like it, and they wield a lot of power down in Richmond, and I'm not very optimistic. But we'll see. I'm going to try on Monday to get it through. I think my constituent is bringing some of his tap water to serve. So we'll see how that goes. Maybe it'll open their mind. So a couple other bills I want to mention really quick. On the transportation front, I had a bill to ban using your phone while you drive. That bill died on the Senate Transportation Committee by 1 vote. Another bill died in the House Courts Committee on a tie vote, a similar bill. But you know, driving fatalities in the United States were up for the first time in 50 years last year. They've been going down, you know, as cars get safer, you know, airbags and automatic seat belts, and basically better designed cars. But fatalities actually went up for the first time last year, and all the experts say it's because people are looking at their phones while they drive. And there was a poll that came out last week actually said 76% of Virginians support hands-free in cars. But I had a lot of colleagues that just thought it was too much government in a car, and they didn't like the government telling people what they could or couldn't do inside of a car, and so I couldn't get it through. But I'll try next year. I mean, we're making progress. I mean, the House used to be a complete dead end, and I think they're kind of open to it now. So we might see something next year, but this year's dead. More locally, Paul and I have been hearing a lot of complaints about Sherwood Hall Lane and the situation with the bike lanes. I know, Stork's still here. He had to leave at 9:30, he probably left. So Supervisor Highland also was very upset about this. He had somebody illegally pass him on the right like 10 times going to work, and he just got fed up. And so that's when we got Sherwood Hall Lane restriped with those bike lanes out there. And now what's going on, you know, everybody gets on Waze or Google Maps, and it tells them that when you come down the Parkway, the quickest way to get down Route 1 is to take Sherwood Hall Lane, right? So you have all these commuters that are using Sherwood Hall Lane that didn't used to. And so now you have a whole bunch of people that are in a big hurry on Sherwood Hall, and they're using the bike lanes to pass people on the right when somebody stops to make a left turn. Or you'll get people that use a bike lane to pass somebody when the cars queue up at red light. And that is extremely dangerous if somebody's riding a bike. And state law isn't very clear about whether or not it's okay to use a bike lane to pass somebody on the right. And so I put in a bill that makes it clear you cannot use a bike lane to pass somebody on the right, number one. And I put in another bill that says that if you injure a pedestrian or cyclist with a car, it makes it easier to hold them accountable. It's called a vulnerable user law. And Those have been enacted in 12 other states, and hopefully we'll get in Virginia. Both those bills passed the Senate and are on their way. Next, my favorite topic, predatory lending. The good news is that 2 car title lenders have shut down on Route 1 in the last 6 months. Isn't that great news? Yeah, so the bad news is, this is like whack-a-mole, right? So these internet lenders have popped up. They make loans to people over the internet, and they use Indian tribes. These companies have signed deals with Indian tribes to do it, so it's a lot harder to sue them because they're sovereign nations in another country or whatever. And there's also companies in other countries that are making these loans, and they've documented interest rates, between 300 and 400%. The Poverty Law Center told me they had one that was 5,000%. And that's, when you count the fees you have to pay every month and stuff, if you actually add it up, given the size of the loan, that's how it amortizes out. So anyways, I put in a bill to regulate internet loans. It actually passed the Commerce and Labor Committee, which shocked me because they usually never pass anything. But when I got to the floor, the industry started to make some noises. And so basically my bill says now, and it passed the Senate this way, it says that the Bureau of Financial Institutions has to come up with a system to regulate these internet lenders by next year. And we'll hopefully enact something next year. But I think there is actually traction on both sides to do something about these guys. And then the 6th thing I'll say, I'll just talk about higher ed really quick, but the UVA situation I think is just outrageous. It came out last year that the UVA had raised tuition by 50% over the last 10 years, and they've made a profit of over $1 billion, okay, between their students and their hospital. And then they took that $1 billion and invested it, made another $1 billion. So now UVA is sitting on $2.1 billion of cash, right? At the same time, they're boosting tuition like crazy. And to me, that was just totally unacceptable. VCU is sitting on $1.1 billion, Virginia Tech sitting on $400 million. All the other schools are under $100 million. Our rainy day fund for the whole state is $400 million. So UVA's strategic reserve fund is 5 times the amount of the cash reserves for the state of Virginia. Okay? And, I never thought we created these colleges to earn a profit. I mean, they're supposed to keep their tuition low and make sure as many students get in and can go through. And so, I put in a bill that says that they can't do a tuition increase without providing 30 days notice to the public and having an opportunity for public comment. And that bill is actually passed. Right now, we find out about tuition increase in a press release. And I think all these schools should have to provide some opportunity for that. And there's a few other bills about higher ed that are out there too. But I'm going to leave it at that. If you have any other questions about oh, I'm sorry, one other thing I want to talk about. I don't know if you all heard that. One thing I heard about last night, there was at least one, maybe more immigration raids on Route 1 last night. And I had people texting me, Facebook messaging me, federal immigration raids. Right, the state has nothing to do with this. Well, we have a role to play, but a little bit of a role, but not really. But apparently they did a raid on they're picking up people off the street. Somebody sent me a picture of people detained across the 7-Eleven near the Aldi, down Route 1. And I heard, once this started happening, there's rumors flying around, but I heard it from about 5 or 6 different people. Anyways, it's really troubling to me. You heard it was a nationwide effort. And I have a friend who knows some immigration officers, and they told him that they're under a lot of pressure to bring a lot of people in right now as part of this new enforcement effort, and it's really unprecedented. And as somebody of Jewish descent, this stuff really worries me. I've been telling my kids we need to go and walk through the top floor of the Holocaust Museum, because from my perspective, a lot of what happened there started this way, and people didn't say anything about it when it started. And I'm not going to do that. I think it's unacceptable they run around picking up people off the streets who are obeying the law. And I've already called Senator Kane's office, Congressman Byers' office, Senator Warner's office, and they're trying to get us information to find out exactly what happened. But I had one of my daughter's friend at my house last night who was crying her eyes out because of the fear that is created out in the community about this stuff. And one of the bills I had would require DMV to give a driver's license to everybody if they could show they paid their taxes and and had lived in Virginia, regards to their immigration status. That bill also died by 1 vote. So, thanks. But I think you're going to be hearing more about immigration, and I think the three of us are you know, ready, willing, and able to fight what is likely to happen. But,
Thank you, Senator Surovell. Scott Surovell was a great senator, and he was the delegate from the 44th before I was. And I just want to thank him. I don't see these guys too much until now, which is crossover, which started this week. But we're down there, we're all kind of sequestered on our side of on the House side, and they're over on the Senate side. And there's a, you know, we're there early in the morning until late at night, and we really never get a chance to see them. And it's fun, so I get to talk to these guys. But we will be seeing a lot of Senator Surovell and Senator Ebbin because their bills, they have a lot of bills that are crossing over. However, that's because in the Senate, you have, first of all, there's two different rules. There's two different things that happen in the Senate. One is they can introduce as many bills as they want, even in this short session. In the House, we're only allowed to introduce 15. And the second reason is it's almost a 50-50 split amongst the two parties in the Senate. So they're able to work together they have to work together to get anything passed. In the House, there's only 34 Democrats, and there's 66 Republicans. So do the math, you can tell my bills don't go very far. But I did get some, we do want to talk about a few things, but before I do that, I want to thank everybody for coming. I want to again thank the staff, and I also want to announce, you probably heard about this, but I've got some flyers, but the DMV Connect, I want to thank the DMV. They're going to be coming to the library every single third Wednesday. And so we have an opportunity to go to the library. So that's going to be really great. You'll be able to do everything you can do. You know, you can get your special ID cards, copies of your driving records, vehicle titles, license plates, decals, everything, order disabled placards. Yeah, Virginia birth certificates, that's important, and you can get your Easy Pass transponder, all kinds of stuff. So there's more information about that, and we'll be hanging around a little bit afterwards too for questions, and we'll take questions before we end. So let me just tell you a little bit about some of the bills. Well, some of the stuff that happened on the House side, and we did, you know, Senator Surovell mentioned with the immigration, there was a lot of nasty, really, I think, mean-spirited bills that they tried to ram down our throats, and then we were able to kill a lot of stuff even in subcommittee and committee because it's just really beyond the pale. And I was able to tell my immigrant story. My mom immigrated here from England, and my father's parents from Czechoslovakia, now the Czech Republic. And so you have to kind of personalize it a little bit so they can see, hey, there's an immigrant here in our General Assembly, you know, or an immigrant son, and he's just like all of us. And so I think that's kind of what we have to do. We have to show, we have to get down there, and I do appreciate it. I know many of you come and visited, many of you come and testified at our committee hearings, and that's the way that we can change, you know, the hearts and minds of the other side, is by meeting them and working with them. And I think there's some movement in that regard. But anyway, there's been a lot of bills, and the Democrats have really been working on jobs. That's been our main thing. It's all about getting the economy. The budget that our governor presented was a good budget. And let me just see, it's a little small one here. They gave us 2 days to read it. But it's crazy. And there's the amendments. Yeah, we had a couple hours with those. But you can only do so much. You have to kind of like nibble around the edges with these things and figure out what you're going to focus on, what's going to make the biggest difference, what you have a chance on. There was a lot of divisive and discriminatory legislation. I know Senator Ebbin is going to talk a lot about that. We killed that awful, it was actually in the first week on the House side, we killed that awful HB2 version from North Carolina. So that was really good. The bathroom bill. I mean, so there's one delegate in particular from I won't mention his name, out there. Where is he, in Prince William? Yeah. And Bob Marshall. Yeah, I didn't want to say his name, but he's fixated on anything sexual. I mean, he had a bill in one of our committees, which we killed. Luckily, it was not allow any kids under 18 to buy cell phones, and why? Because they would use it for sexting. I mean, you know, it just went on and on about all these studies of how awful it would be to have kids with you know, smartphones. I said, hey, you know, that cow's already out of the barn, right? I mean, my daughter's 15, she's had a phone for a couple years. So I said, you know, really, I think the parents should be responsible for working with their kids on you know, on their phone use, right? We had another bill that declared pornography as the, you know, as the problem that we all have, and that it's the if we could just get rid of pornography, the world would be a better place. Again, I said, you know, I don't think you're going to be able to do that, and it didn't have any money for, you know, any programs to help people. It's just a declaration, and so I spoke up on the floor and I said, my constituents don't have this problem. And I was only able to convince 8 people to vote with me. So I hope nobody will come out with literature when they run against me and says I'm for pornography. But I'll have to deal with that when it happens. So we had, there were some other bills I'm really disturbed by. In this budget, one of the things we tried to fight was the defunding of Planned Parenthood. Unfortunately, that is in the budget, and probably, I don't know about the Senate side, but they can tell you when we reconcile the budgets and come up with one. But that, we could not kill that budget amendment. They also killed a budget amendment to establish paid family leave, which is unfortunate. We had a lot of good language to protect workers, and those were all systematically killed. The worst one, and hopefully there is some life on the Senate side, but as I said, the Senate kind of works in a moderate way, and they get bills crossed, and it comes over to our side where we just kill them all. And but there are, on redistricting reform, I hope many of you, I'm sure, are interested in that. That's the only way we're going to allow people to have a fair, you can pick your legislators instead of us picking our voters. And I think that's what we have to do. And I know we killed them in the House, but they are, I think Tuesday, they're coming to our P&E committee about 2 or 3 bills, a couple of Republican bills too, right? But I'll let Senator Ebbin talk about that. But that's been a major disappointment to me. I thought this year would be the year we would get redistricting reform in the House. But maybe it'll happen. Yeah, we'll see. I'm still hopeful. I've only been there 2 years, so I still think things can actually happen. I'm starting to learn that's not always the case. What else I want to make sure that Scott hasn't covered? Oh, the teacher thing. So the budgets are different. So they've got the Senate budget, we've got the House budget, and the governor gave us his budget. So now what we're doing is we're reconciling the House and the Senate. We've already thrown away the governor's budget. The House has got their version and the Senate's got theirs. One of the things that Senator Surovell mentioned, which is great in the Senate budget, is the raises for teachers. It's not in the House budget. So the House, I don't know how that will work out in conference, but unfortunately there are no raises. Sorry, Karen. There are no raises in the House budget for teachers, and that is an awful thing. We're working on that. Yes.
Money in the House budget which allows for
That's true.
teacher compensation. It's just not tagged to a percentage size, and so there is about $100,000. Neither budget has a lot of money for schools, but there is a $100,000 difference between the Senate version versus the House version of the two approaches to education. The Senate version ties 2%, but it's 2% in the biennium. So it could have been 2% last year or this year, but at least it's 2%. The importance of that is that it then raises the benchmark for teachers across the state. So that actually helps us versus the House side is untethered.
Right. So actually, in some ways, as Karen just mentioned, the House side is a better deal because it's untethered and you can do what you want, and so that's kind of good. The Senate's a better amount. So, our teachers are paid $7,200 less than the national average, and that is travesty. I mean, it's embarrassing. We pay our teachers very poorly. And remember, the teachers work for the state; they work for us, right? And so they're not. And just like all of at the higher ed too, with the public universities, they all get paid by us, all the state workers. And some of these state workers haven't been given a raise in many years. The state police, you heard from Senator Surovell, we've been just training them to go to other states. So it's Virginia's been a training academy, that's a waste of taxpayer money. So this finally they're getting a raise. I think also the sheriff deputies are getting a raise, but not the guy. I don't believe the corrections workers are getting a raise. Maybe just the small raise. I don't know, but it's in here. I'll have to look at it afterwards. But there's you know, it is a tough time in the budget. I think the House has done a good job, and the governor certainly set a good benchmark with his budget. But there are some things in there that are kind of penny wise, pound foolish. Like we've taken out all the cybersecurity money that we need for the future, and that's a growing, you know, that's very important for the economy. We've also taken out all the governor had in there the benefits for mental health. There was $4.2 million provided by the governor to invest in mental health screenings and assessments for local and regional jails. That was cut out, and that's very important, you know, and that we should not be cutting that out. The last thing I want to talk about is just some of my bills really quick. Oh, another thing that I know we're all very interested in is solar power, and there's $1.1 million in funding that was eliminated by the House to provide low interest loans to spur development of solar power. That unfortunately put out. And you know, there is money there's still, even though it's a lean budget and it's kind of, and they've done a pretty good job of it, there are places where there's a waste of money. For example, there's $10 million for this Jamestown Yorktown celebration that's coming up. I'm sure it's going to be important, and it's nice for, you know, historically it's a good thing. But when you have, you know, when you're cutting money for mental health screenings at the jails, you should not be spending $10 million on a celebration. I think that's a mistake. So with and I don't know if you all got a copy because we didn't expect such a great crowd, and thank you all for coming. This is exciting, and I think it's an exciting year. Virginia is the only, you know, we're the only thing happening this year. We have a gubernatorial race, so Lieutenant Governor, Attorney General, and yours truly will be on the ballot in November. And so it's really important that we have a big turnout and that we show the rest of the country that we care about people. And I think you're going to get some good candidates that you can choose. And I hope to see you all out on Election Day. I know you will be. And sign my petition if you don't mind. We have a petition at the front, and so anybody who lives in the 44th district, and the 44th is pretty much, it's all from West Potomac High School to Mount Vernon High School, down, not Westgate, but everything up to Westgate, all along the river, and then across Route 1, up to Huntley Meadows Park. I have a little piece over in Hayfield Elementary School area, which I doubt anybody's here because we're going to have another town meeting this afternoon out that way. But so it's very compact, and it's this whole area, so pretty much I would assume most of you are in that district. Okay, so my legislative, like I said, 2 of my bills got through crossover. They passed the Senate. They were very nice. Thank you very much, you guys, for voting for them. They were very important. One of these bills was an ID bill, and I think it's really important that we have as many ways to go and vote as possible, because the House, again, they're fixated on identification cards. If you don't have an ID card, they even passed the ID card where you need to have a picture ID card to mail in for your absentee ballot. I don't know how that works. I mean, who are they looking at when they get that? They have nobody to look at. It's silly. It doesn't make any sense. But they do it, and why do they do it? Because they're trying to keep people from voting. And that's just a sad thing, because we need to all vote. We need everybody to participate, and we shouldn't be afraid of the voters. And so I had a bunch of bills. Thank you. I had a bill when I was upstairs on the 9th floor. I'll never forget. It's like the first week, and my bill was to let anybody over 65 would be no excuse get vote absentee. And there was somebody, I think it was Vivian Watts, Delegate Watts, who was right before me, and she had the same bill, and I didn't know that. You know, sometimes we don't really coordinate. We just get those bills in. And so they killed her bill. So I thought, well, 65 obviously is too young, so I'll make it 80. So I thought, first I was going to do 70, but 75, 80. I thought 80, no one's going to argue with 80 years old. And so I went out there and I talked about my own parents who are in their 80s, and I said, you know, if it's a week before the election, they can see that there's going to be a snowstorm or something, and they're worried about showing up on election day. Maybe they can vote, you know, they could vote early, they could come on Saturday and vote at the government center without having to have an excuse. No excuse. If you're over 80, you should be able to just vote early. And And so I had to first go up there, and had my bill was for 65, so I have to ask for an amendment. And I do an amendment, I said, I'm amending the bill to 80. I should have done 85 or 90, frankly, but maybe 100. So I went up there in 80, and one of the Republicans said, he goes, well, my dad's 86 years old, he plays golf every day. I wasn't forcing him to vote early, and so I said, well, that's great. That's great that your dad can vote early, but this is not, your dad can do whatever he wants. He can show on election day. But this is for people who can't play golf every day, and are worried about voting and worried about the weather, worried about what they're going to do, and if they have doctor's appointments that day, that kind of thing. So that's how hard it is. I mean, it's very difficult to get them to make voting easier. And unfortunately, that was one of my bills that died. But the one that did make it through, and the one the Senate passed, and then hopefully next week the governor will sign into law. It's not a big thing, really. It started as a big thing, but it gets whittled down, and you have to make these compromises to get it across. But it was a bill so anybody over 70 that doesn't want to drive, and you don't have to be 70, you can be 90, you can be 80, and you get this ID card, and it's just like a driver's license. It looks the same. It even has, you can have your donor, your organ donor designation. Yes, thank you. So your organ donor. Everybody, I hope you all are organ donors. So it's important. And so you show up with that, and you would have it for the rest of your life. They did not like that. They said, well, people change. Their picture won't look the same. They're very fixated on the whole photo. I'm like, really, our 75 and 80-year-olds going to be going around, committing crimes, voter fraud? I mean, I don't see that as a big problem. But anyway, they were worried about it. So I finally had to, I had the final, I won't bore you with all the details, but at the end, we synced it up with the driver's licenses. So driver's licenses now last for 8 years. So your voter ID will last for 8 years. Or this ID card that's a non-driving ID card. So if you don't drive, it doesn't matter how old you are. If you're a millennial, it doesn't matter. If you don't drive and you want an ID card that looks just like a driver's license but cannot be used for driving, this is the ID for you, and it's great. And you only have to go to the DMV every second time. So 16 years after you get it, you can go to the DMV and get it renewed. So it's good for 16 years. Every 8 years, you need to go online and renew it. So anyway, that got through. I got another bill through for the governor, but I was very disappointed in that I did not get my bill. This died in committee at 10 to 10. And let me tell you, I was really disappointed because it was a Democrat that missed the vote, and I would have won. So it means I worked hard. I got some Republican support. But anyway, these light bulbs, do not buy these light bulbs. I bought them, and I thought they were great because they got a little bright green glow here. It makes it look like it's energy. It's great for the environment. If you look at the small print, it says lamp contains mercury, managed in accordance with disposal laws. Well, guess what? We don't have a disposal law. So that's what I tried to pass, a disposal law to take care of this, to recycle this mercury. One of these light bulbs has enough mercury to poison 6,000 gallons of water. So when you guys do when you don't throw these in your trash, please, you're going to have to work with Dan Stork and figure out a way to recycle these and but we don't have a law at the state level, but I'm sure the county will work on something, but we've got to recycle these. These are you shouldn't buy them, frankly. I'm not buying them. So that was one of the ones that I had a shot at, but we'll bring it back. The other ones, I worked with a young student from West Potomac High School who came up with a great idea, and that was that we should all wear our seatbelts. I thought that was the law. Did you guys know that in the back seat, if you're over 18, you don't have to wear a seatbelt? Anybody know that? Well, just because you now know it doesn't mean you can take your seatbelt off, okay? Wear your seatbelt no matter where you are. I tried to make that case in the subcommittee. I got one Republican to vote with me, so it's 4-4, and if it's a tie, that's 10-10 tie in the committee, it dies. So, and I asked him afterwards, I said, wow, how did I convince you? He said, you didn't convince me. He said, unfortunately, his best friend's daughter was in the backseat of a car the day before Christmas last year, died. And that's why I said, wow, that would have been helpful. Had you mentioned that, we would have gotten some of your Republican colleagues, but he didn't want to get his Republican colleagues. He was doing it for himself. So I said, well, maybe next year we can work together and I can get, it could be your bill. I don't care whose bill it is, right? I mean, it doesn't matter. So maybe he can get it in. The other one I had was, that died right away, was seatbelts in the school buses, and I think that's very important. There was a horrific accident in Tennessee in December. 5 or 6 kids were killed. In Ireland about 5 years ago, a number of kids were killed in the buses. I mean, when these buses turn over, just imagine our kids, they're flying, these buses are big, they're flying through and they're smashing into the other kids, and it's very unsafe, you're breaking bones and everything, and some of them are dying. I mean, so it's not hard. You know, the school bus driver has a seatbelt. So it should be good enough for everybody. And they talk about, well, the kids won't wear the seatbelts. Well, kids won't sit down either, will they? I mean, you've got to work with them. And if you start with first graders wearing these seatbelts, by the time they're high school students, they'll be wearing them. Plus, they go home and they wear, you know, they're in your cars and they get used to being in a seatbelt. They should always wear a seatbelt, and that's important, and it would save a lot of lives and a lot of broken bones. And I was not able to get that even out of subcommittee. I mean, the problem is they feel like, you know, the government should not be telling us what to do with our, you know, with our safety. I mean, that's the issue, and I think there's, you know, I think we have to be careful of government overreach, but in this case, I think that it makes an eminent sense to be for the safety of the people to have seatbelts on. So anyway, we'll work on those. I know there's a lot more. You can read about it in my thing, and you can ask questions. We had a lot of good automatic voter registration died. Oh, one good thing, temporary assistance in needy families. Let me just say, I did have a budget amendment, and we were able to get that up 2.5%. That's only the third time. Now, again, this has a budget. I mean, we still have 2 more weeks of session, but assuming that the budget does pass and that stays in the budget, it will only be the third time that TANF has increased since TANF started, and that's temporary assistance in needy families was to replace the old it's the welfare reform. I think it's been around since the 1985 maybe. So we're talking a long time, and it's like $300 a month. 2.5% of 300 is not a lot of money, and you can't really, you know, this assistance is necessary for people to go out there and find a job, and they only get it for 2 years, 5 years lifetime, though there was a bill to try to cut it to a 2-year total lifetime. And with $300, you know, that's not much assistance really. So it should be called temporary and skimpy. But we really need to give them a shot in the arm so that folks have that, you know, have that short period of time, but they have the time and the money to be able to get the job and take care of their family. So anyway, that was what happened so far. Thank you very much. Here's Senator Ebbin.
Hi. Good morning. I'm Senator Adam Ebbin, happy to represent parts of Mount Vernon along with Senator Surovell and Delegate Krizek. I work to try and make it easier to vote, prevent gun violence, and have a cleaner environment. I serve on 3 Senate committees. One is called General Laws and Technology. One is called Agriculture, Conservation, and Natural Resources. The third is Privileges and Elections, which is the oldest committee in the General Assembly. George Washington served on it. Even before there was a Virginia Senate, so I'm trying to not necessarily follow in his footsteps, but be a diligent member. And I know there are a lot of bills that people are interested in, so I'm just going to mention a few and talk a little bit about my own legislation. A lot of people here are concerned with Airbnb, and Delegate Krizek's been a real leader in going down to Richmond and making sure the community is informed about what's happened. Last year we had a very weak Airbnb bill. This year the Senate passed a bill. It doesn't have a lot in it, but it allows for fining $500 for each violation, and it also does not take away a locality's right to regulate Airbnb. They just, go ahead, applaud Paul. He wanted to applaud, so. There are, in Arlington, they just set up some regulations, so perhaps Fairfax will do that as well. Now, on the Privileges and Elections Committee, we faced some pretty bad legislation and a few good things. We did pass in the Senate several constitutional amendments dealing with redistricting to make it more fair and nonpartisan. That will go into a House committee that it does not do well in, but we're going to keep pressing forward. Another one we passed the other day, you may have seen it in the paper, would have given us, the General Assembly, the right to overrule any state regulation, which is bad for a number of reasons. First off, you have separation of powers. Secondly, it's very impractical. Can you imagine a regulation going into effect in May and then us coming back, voting on it, and then the following July it being repealed? And those regulations are based generally in things that we've already made into law. So that's kind of crazy. Then we passed a bill which is really convoluted, which says that if you have a polling place where you're not allowed to carry a gun, much like any school, that you could vote absentee just because you can't carry your gun in to vote. We've got about 12 or 16 excuses to vote, and that's a pretty broad one and kind of ridiculous. Some people liked it because they said, well, then anyone can vote absentee because they can't carry a gun into the polling place. But I think that's kind of hard to explain to folks. I had a different approach. My approach was to allow for early voting the 3 weeks before the election, which did not pass. But we're going to keep working on that. I was disappointed that the committee did a few things like made it so that you could not enumerate, not list the names of the people who got absentee votes unless it's a much, much closer election, which I think is discouraging because if there is a significant absentee vote, the press and the public have a right to easily know who got those absentee votes. Further, there was a bill that said when there's votes that are provisional ballots, meaning you go to your polling place and there's some question about whether or not you're entitled to vote there. And in many cases you are because DMV screwed up or something went wrong, that the election could be certified before you count the provisional ballots if they won't, quote, make a difference. It's a big urban legend that right now we don't certify that absentee votes and things like that aren't counted if they won't make the difference, and that's not true. And I said in committee and on the floor that, you know, I just think it's wrong not to have an election over before all the votes are counted. So that went forward. I'm hoping the governor will veto that. And we are very lucky in that the three of us, in our views, and perhaps most of the views in this room, that we have a governor who can veto bad legislation. Thus far, he's vetoed this at 71 or so bills, and he's going for the record this year. And we think that he'll be provided with that. I don't want to be too partisan. This is a bipartisan meeting, but I will say, just want to underscore the importance of the statewide election. And if you agree with me, you want to have a governor who will stand up for those same ideals. If you disagree with me, you want to not. So, and there'll be a primary in June on that too. Now, Delegate Surovell, Senator Surovell, now Senator Surovell, mentioned the combined sewer overflow issue from Alexandria City. And I just want to fill in a few details. 95% of Alexandria has separated sewers, but it is still a significant problem coming out of Old Town where these pipes have been in there for 80, 90 years. So there are 4 outflows, and the reason that the 3 in Honey Creek have been prioritized is because that's a more concentrated body of water, and the effects are much more significant. No one's excusing the effects of going to Orinoco Bay where it's diluted, more diluted, but Alexandria's been in compliance with all state and federal laws, but they would be clamping down on the outflow in Orinoco Bay, starting that planning process soon, and the city council voted to accelerate that. I wanted to accelerate it from a planning point of view. The bill that passed the Senate, and I offered a substitute on the floor, requires a date certain by which it's finished, and the Senate date was that it would be finished in about 5 years, which is less than Scott's bill, and it's crazy because I had read from the engineering study on the Senate floor about how these things typically take 9 to 12 years to do, and you know, if you say further, the bill would have required a loss of all state funding in Alexandria, about $150 million a year, singled out Alexandria, not Lynchburg would have the problem, not Richmond would have the problem, but just one city, meaning Alexandria. So that's going to be accelerated one way or another, and the solutions aren't easy, which is why it can take so long. I mean, you could potentially have to build a 3 million gallon tank, a holding tank, to go under Orinoco Bay or into contaminated soil on the side of the bay, below the river, below the level of the bay and the river. So it's not an easy thing, and because Alexandria is already involved in these other 3 outflows, this is probably a $300 million combined public works project that'll be paid for by the people of Alexandria. We had $1 million, just $1 million in the state budget a few years ago that would have allowed for some of the planning process, and that was taken out. Meanwhile, Richmond and Lynchburg have gotten 100 and 200 millions of backed state dollars, both in grants and some loans. So anyway, it's gonna be accelerated, but it's a matter of how it's accelerated. I had a bill which Senator Surovell made me think of it, because I had a bill for an Office of Immigrant Services, which was defeated, but in past years we've put it forward, so I'm going to keep working towards that. Then some of my other legislation has to do with energy storage. We have a solar energy authority here in Virginia, and I want to expand it to include energy storage. Energy storage, whether it's green energy or traditional energy, is important for our grid. And for green energy particularly, it's important because if we could store solar energy, store wind energy, it makes it much more usable, reliable, and effective. So I'm going to keep working on that because it allows for accelerating research at state colleges and universities, and it'll make us not just a research leader, but more of an energy leader. So that's something we're still working on. It's alive. That's my way of saying the bill is alive. It's going over to the House on Tuesday, and I've written to all Paul's colleagues who serve on the Energy and, the Commerce and Labor Committee, hoping that we can get that done. It's been endorsed by Dominion.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's been endorsed by the Heating, Refrigeration, and Air Conditioning Institute, and it's been endorsed by the Northern Virginia Technology Council. Those are the ones I'm going to emphasize in committee. Now, on a lighter note, or actually, before I get to my more serious ones, I'll mention on a lighter note, I've been working hard to get George Washington's rye whiskey designated as the official spirit of the Commonwealth. I mean, we've got milk as the official drink, we've got an official lizard, we've got 2 official songs, we're even going to have an official TV show. Yeah, we did an official mineral Nelsonite last year, or rock, or whatever. Yeah.
The official TV show.
It's supposed to be called Song of the Mountains. Has anyone seen it?
No.
Yeah, the only reason I voted for it is I didn't want to upset the apple cart if I could get my my spirit through. So, but on a more serious note, I've been working to see that people don't lose their driver's licenses when they have a criminal offense for lack of being able to pay their court costs and their fines. Now, that bill was going to be very expansive, and I trimmed it back very much because I knew we'd have the support of the Republican members of the Courts Committee. So it's trimmed back only to be an extension to 90 days before you lose those things. But I wanted to get it over to the House, and then whether or not they make it better, anything that passes can go up to the governor's desk and he can amend it. So we'll see how that goes. And then on the driver's license issue, I've also been working on the issue of first-time marijuana offenses. Right now, those with a marijuana offense, first time or a subsequent one, lose their driver's licenses for 6 months in Virginia, which is unrelated to the crime. We're not talking about people who are driving while impaired. We're talking about people who are apprehended with some marijuana. And I've also been working on decriminalization. That bill was sent to the Crime Commission. And by sending it to the Crime Commission for study, that's a step forward. And I should mention the driver's license bill for marijuana offenders has passed the Senate 38-2. It's passed the House, I think, 99-0 in a different form. We got a Republican to introduce it. So this bill's going to pass. I've been working on it for a few years, and I'm really excited about that. Then we had a few other bills I'm just going to mention quickly. One of them is a 20-week abortion ban. That bill was killed, so there will be no further moving forward that bill. And then Paul mentioned, I believe, that Planned Parenthood was defunded the House budget. What happens is these 2 budgets that we both voted on last Wednesday will go to each other's bodies, and we will then reject each other's, and it'll go to the conference committee. And in the past, in the conference committee, sometimes that's a good thing, because the conference committee in the past has preserved that funding. And it's not funding for abortions, it's funding for women's health, for cancer screenings, for mammograms and other things. So it's key. And then I did pass non-discrimination state employment with regard to state hiring. And we passed that in housing as well. And those continue to move forward. I'm really happy to see that they've moved forward with a 2/3 margin this year in the Senate. I've been working on this since before Mark Warner was elected, working with him on executive orders. And we've had executive orders under the 3 of the last 4 governors, but we need that to be consistent. Again, the House is more difficult on that, but we're going to still press forward. Now, Scott has been a leader, not just on the coal ash issue, but on Route 1, and Paul, we've all been working together on Route 1 funding for the Embark process plan to widen Route 1 and to have bus rapid transit, and hopefully eventually Metro down 2 stops from Huntington, though that is a much longer term project because Metro has a lot of fixes that need to be made. Now, we applied, or I should say Fairfax County applied for $200 million in funding from the state, and there's this ranking system that projects are considered on a variety of bases. We did not do well like we should this cycle, and I mean 66 and 95 had much better projections. It's based partly on how many people are going to take off the roads and traffic congestion, and because the future development wasn't yet taken into consideration, it didn't score as well. But Fairfax, particularly Mount Vernon and Lee, will be redoing their comprehensive plans, and when they show the projections of the housing and businesses on Route 1 that we're expecting in the future, it will score better, so we're hopeful for the future on that. And I'll just mention one thing in the budget. We had a lot of it covered already, but I spoke on the floor against cuts to elections funding in the state budget. I don't know how many people are familiar with the VERIS system, which stands for the, well anyway, it's the statewide voter registration and election management system. It's an online portal. And we had a big problem this year where the whole system crashed at the day of the voter registration deadline. So we need more money going into that, not less. And the Senate budget cuts $4 million from the Department of Elections request put in by the governor. So this is a drastic effect. Not only does it cut new funding for servers and staff and all that, but it cuts some money that would replace funds, federal funds that we get from the Help Americans Vote Act. And that act provides funding to Virginia. It's going to be depleted by the 3rd quarter this year. So, and we get, this money would have replaced that. So not only will we not have new funding for elections to make it a little bit better, but we won't have funding that we already have. So in effect, we'd have less. Now the House didn't do that. Good job, Paul. Thank you. But the Senate did, and we're hopeful that in conference it'll improve. So I really want to, I know we all want to take your questions. So with that, why don't we recognize people, and if you could, stand up and speak really loud.
Okay. Or you can get the mic from me.
Okay, we've got, Chris has a mic, so he's in the back and he'll just recognize people.
Hi.
Yeah.
Hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I am a 4th grade teacher in Fairfax County Public Schools. Senator Surovell, Senator Ebbin, and thank you, Delegate Krizek. My question, I'm going to narrow it down on stream protection rule that was just voted against by the thank you, Delegate Krizek, for responding to my email.
Hold it close to your mouth. Is it still on? Just shout that.
We'll repeat your question if we can hear it. There we go. Here's that. Yeah, here's your.
Here's my question, okay? The stream protection rule was finalized by the Obama administration December 19, 2016. However, some version of that has been in existence since '83, okay? Now, Senate and Congress have just mixed it, and it's going to Trump's desk to say, no, we're not going to have any more stream protection. This is what it did, okay, folks? It says that it is really concerning strip mining, and this concerns all of us because it affects our streams and our ecosystems. When you strip mine, basically what happens, you blow off the mountaintops, okay? And when you do that, you put, as the representatives up here talked about, you have waste of selenium, mercury, and arsenic. Okay, now that gets into our streams, that gets into our land, it gets everywhere, okay? So that's what our Congress is saying, no, we don't have to worry about that because we get more jobs. So my question is this, okay, to the legislative side. Can Virginia override what the United States government is doing? And this is just going to be the beginning of attacks against the environment.
Okay. So
can Virginia override?
Yes. So the question is, can our Department of Environmental Quality, or particularly the legislature, enact stronger environmental protections than the federal government? The answer is yes, unless we were specifically prohibited from doing so, which I don't think we're prohibited from doing so. Now, regarding the strip mining, I don't know in Southwest Virginia if there's currently, with the way coal is going, currently new strip mining starting. But we can...
I just read an article that said in Virginia that this is an issue. So
okay, well let's look into it further, and if you can email us. You know what I'm going to suggest, since we don't have a working mic, is why don't people line up towards the front next to that camera if you have a question. That way we'll be able to hear you and we can restate the question.
Can I just say about let me just say something about the streams really quick. First of all, we have a stream expert here in the room. It's Martin Tillett. If any of you have never talked to Martin, Martin feels very passionate about stream health and stream health here in our community. So our streams around here are a complete disaster because of our stormwater system. And the county is slowly taking steps to deal with it, but we need to. And he can give you a great tour of streams in Mount Vernon and show you how dead they are and all the different problems we have here. They're totally different than when I was a kid. But I haven't heard about strip mining in Virginia. I think it's mostly, especially with the decline of coal. I don't think there's a lot more strip mining going on in Virginia. That's
okay, I don't
know. 1,000 coal mining jobs.
But I'm just concerned about. Go ahead, Delegate Krizek.
No, you have a very good concern. I mean, this is on the environment, but this is going to happen with a lot of situations here, right? The feds are going to be deregulating all of our protections, and we're going to have, and maybe at the state level, we're going to be the ones that are defending, what's good and right and just. And that's happening. You can see that's already happening with the with Trump's ban on Muslims, and how the states like Virginia, our Attorney General has sued the federal government, and that's what we're going to have to do. We're going to have to fight the feds here at the state level, and we're certainly going to try to do that.
All right, I just want to say something, okay? I teach 4th grade. Our first science unit is ecosystems. Fairfax County tells us we're all connected.
Okay.
We're all connected.
All right, we're gonna thank you. And I'll just repeat that because it's important. These little kids at Fort Hunt Elementary School, 4th graders, they're learning about the ecosystem, and now they're being told by the president that the ecosystem's not important. And we've got to fight that, and there's no doubt we're going to do that.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for what you do for the kids and for teaching them. Here's the second question. Okay, try to make the questions short because there's lots of you, and we're going to be here for another hour.
I'm going to be very quick. Here is this, and I am here to concede to the Board of Zoning Affairs that they are, I believe, to be criminally intent. And there's a bunch of documentation in there. I've been printed in the Mount Vernon Gazette. I've been printed in the Washington Post, and I am here to concede. You guys win. The whole bureaucracy wins.
We're not on the Board of Zoning Appeals, but thank you for your documents, and you may want to all read the Mount Vernon Gazette and the Post to get his views.
Who is he?
My name is Maria de Leon. Thank you for the town hall meeting and answering my text message, Senator, yesterday. We're getting a lot of phone calls at home because of ICE. They're knocking on doors, they're picking up people. And and there's a group of us that came here this morning. I know that y'all make phone calls, but what I'm urging is everybody here to please call Congress. There was on national TV, there was an immigration attorney that said that we need to lock our doors and not let anybody in. What's going to happen on school day when kids don't go to school because everybody's afraid to come out their doors? Every one of us came from an immigrant family, if you look at your family tree, and they're attacking only the Latino community, and that's just not right. So thank you. If y'all would make the phone calls, that's what we'll say.
Thank you. This is, you guys being here shows that you guys care and that everybody's active and we're going to fight for you. Don't worry. And that's important. Here's our next question.
Besides contacting your federal representatives, there's an organization called the Legal Aid Justice Center. That's an excellent one for people who are directly affected. And there's also a group that advocates for immigrants called Virginia New Majority that you may want to look up on the internet. And the ACLU actually has a lot of information on their website. So ACLU may be the best for guidelines, but the Legal Aid Justice Center is right here in Northern Virginia too.
Hi, I have a quick statement and a request. I spent about, I don't know, hundreds of hours working and advocating on the halt of the Dakota Access Pipeline. And that pipeline traverses 4 states and was permitted through segmental process that is not intended for such a long pipeline. Class action suits are ongoing over the use of eminent domain to force the pipeline against citizens' objections to what is a project to improve billionaires' bottom lines, but will not provide service to the people of that state. The required environmental impact study has not been completed, but the Trump administration has given it the green light without assessment on the effect. And that could impact people downstream along the Missouri River, like millions of people. As a Virginia citizen, I feel that I deserve informational hearings to be held in the Northern Virginia area concerning frac natural gas pipeline companies that are applying for permits that would go through Virginia. This includes Trans-Canada pipeline that would go under the Potomac River in the Hancock, Maryland area that could potentially pollute the drinking water of residents downstream, including the entire DC area. The Atlantic Coast Pipeline threatens our Virginia National Forests and habitats as well as water sources. As a Virginia citizen, I have valued and enjoyed these wildlife habitats and recreational areas since I was a child. People in Northern Virginia deserve to have public hearings and comment sessions on these proposals since they affect the quality of our lives also. Informational meetings on these pipelines are being offered in localities that are in excess of 2 hours from Alexandria. A pipeline does not have to go through our backyards in order for it to have a devastating effect on our children and our grandchildren's quality of life. Dominion Power's long-term direction will be greatly impacted by decisions to build natural gas pipelines rather than move towards sustainable energy sources. I'm hoping that we will get more information here and meetings, and that we will not be bought and sold by Dominion and other power companies. It's time for us to take charge.
Hi, okay, so thank you very much for your statement. We're going to ask folks to try and keep their questions in the form of a question and as short and direct as you could for us to answer it.
But thank you, Pam. We definitely agree with you. Here's Scott's going to tell you a little bit really quick.
Okay. I guess I can answer this one. No, this is a tough one. Yeah, there's 2 pipelines going through Virginia, one coming up in North Carolina, another one crossing the state. It all has to do with all this fracking that's going on out west and access to natural gas. Dominion wants to route it to a big shipping facility on Chesapeake Bay. You've been hearing a lot of unhappy people in Augusta County, Nelson County. There's signs up all over the place because Dominion's basically coming in and condemning people's land, taking it for a pipeline. And there's not a lot that we can do at the state level about that. It's the federal government, I think FERC has approved it. And
we did vote against it.
yeah, well, there are actually, they did remind me, but there is more fracking proposed in Virginia. And I don't know if you all know what fracking is. They basically shoot a bunch of water and chemicals in the ground. The rocks break up and then gas comes out. And they actually want to do this on the northern neck. This is between the Potomac River and the Rappahannock River, running out towards the bay. And the fracking companies presented legislation to us this year that would prohibit even Virginia's environmental regulators from getting their secret sauce of chemicals they want to pump in the ground. And I think we killed the bill in the Senate. We killed the bill, but the bill came through the House, and I think we have to vote on it again on the General Laws Committee again. I think next week. But
What killed again?
yeah, it went to the Finance Committee, and the Finance Committee killed it, but we voted against it. But anyways, that's out there, and you know, if you care about water quality, you don't want people pumping unknown chemicals in the ground. In other states, if you ever watch the movie Gasland, I'd encourage you to watch it. Basically, in the neighborhoods where they've done this, people's water will catch on fire. Literally, they'll go up and you light your water on fire. So, you know, we need to be more careful about that here in Virginia.
My name is Colin Verbecar. I'm a 7th grade special education teacher.
And I'm his husband. My name is Hart Verbecar. I'm a software engineer.
And so I will answer your question by stating in a form of a question. So our thing regards LGBT discrimination, and I've been very pleased on seeing there's a 25-14 vote that you listed on the bill that you had for discrimination in public employment, and another one was 12-3 and 11-3 that had passed in committee. So there is a possibility of actual movement in Senate, potentially the House, if Bob Marshall is given the rye whiskey props. And then the question is there a practical way forward on this extension against or for LGBT non-discrimination? So in a nutshell, my husband and I have been trying to have children for years, and we literally changed our name Verbacy to Gunacar to Verbacar so it would be easier for the children. And Fairfax County Public Schools is a great place. I love working, it's fantastic, but it offers coverage for IVF, 90% of up to $100,000, which is amazing. However, as I told you, the Kirsten Schlegel, the aide, zero benefits at all if you're a gay male, because if it provides that coverage, but if you need a surrogate, that is the only biological way we and numerous other educators across Virginia have as a possibility of having the children. They take away all parts of all coverage.
Okay.
And so if there's any way that can be remedied, we can work.
Okay. I mean, really, there are two ways that could be remedied what you're talking about. One is through state law, and one is through a policy of the public schools. It seems to me that changing state law for requiring in vitro fertilization coverage through insurance or benefits for male couples would be much harder way to go. So I would encourage you not to give up on that, but to get folks in similar situations or across the state to contact their legislators about that, and also to continue to work with your employer seeking benefits to cover that. But we're going to continue, all three of us, to press forward on LGBT rights in a number of ways. Insurance issues are tough as well, but we'll keep working forward, and I appreciate you calling my office about it.
Is there a way to have it be in the same way that it's non-discrimination in public employment and public housing? Is there a way to either have as an addendum or something, just another part of public education, which would be broad enough to...
So the question was, is there another way to kind of fold that into efforts on housing discrimination or state employment discrimination? We can look into the employment piece, but I think it's probably going to end up being a separate benefits issue. But we'll look into it further, and I appreciate you calling us. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Sandy. I hope I'm not freaking you out by recording this. I come to you from Delray, a very friendly neighborhood to Senator Ebbin. And we are, I don't know if everyone here knows Delray, but we are a pretty privileged group of Alexandrians. And we are very, very concerned about the ICE raids that are happening as we speak. My question for you is, we have been really interested in pursuing sanctuary city status, and we've spoken with Senator Ebbin's office and Mark Levine's office and other places about potentially becoming a sanctuary city, and some of us have received advice that maybe pursuing that status would receive immediate retaliation legislation, and that it's actually maybe more problematic and worse for the people that we're trying to protect. And so I'm just wondering, what would you like us to do? We are privileged white folks that want to do something, and we're looking for advice and recommendations.
We already had anti-sanctuary cities bills in both the House and the Senate that have actually passed in party lines on the Senate that were outspoken against it. There are no sanctuary cities in Virginia now, meaning, I mean, depending on your definition, if you consider a sanctuary city to be one that is saying it will violate federal requirements, we don't have that unless you were saying Richmond is already. We know Richmond's moving forward. I don't know how far forward they're moving, but one of the things that we suggest, because a lot of people, feel like they're preaching to the choir on their local government, their local legislators, is when you belong to networks, whether you're involved in the Unitarian Universalist Church or another faith, or whether you support the ACLU or National Organization for Women, or whichever networks you're in, to really work hard, AAUW, to get people in other parts of the state to raise these with their legislators, and there are probably 3 ways to raise these that are most effective. 1 is writing to your legislator, 2 is coming to a meeting like this, and 3 is in this election year to come to campaign forums and ask people.
I mean, do we need to go stand in front of these elementary schools on Monday morning?
To protest?
To make sure that there aren't, ICE officers coming to our school campuses looking for undocumented families? I mean, what do we need to do now?
Yeah.
Yes, is there an ICE office nearby? If we could get all these...
That would be a great place to protest, would be at a ICE office or whichever the appropriate federal offices are here, get attention in the news media. I don't think that we can physically stop people, but there is a Supreme Court ruling regarding immigrant children in schools. The Supreme Court says that we have to provide an education to all children, regardless of their immigration status. We've passed, and that's why bills to say that reporting to federal authorities or asking children or their parents their immigration status, that's illegal. Okay. So I don't know that it would happen at an elementary school.
So parents can't be scooped up dropping their kids off?
I don't know on what basis they scoop people up. Maybe Delegate Surovell's a lawyer. He knows everything. Senator.
I don't know everything, but I had 3 different posts on my Facebook page about this last night, including I put the picture up of the people being arrested on Route 1, and probably the #1 recurring theme was, what can we do? And I thought about that a long time, and the problem with it's getting between an immigration, an ICE person, an ICE officer, and somebody else. From my perspective, that could be obstruction of justice. You get charged with not just protesting, but even a more serious crime. And so I think there's a lot of legal risk in that for anybody that would try to do that. Especially when you talk about interfering with federal law enforcement officials, that's pretty serious business. So, what I've been telling people is, #1, call Mark Warner, call Tim Kaine, call Don Beyer. I know they're all very sensitive to it, but they need to hear from everybody. #2, get information out. Arm yourself with, they've got these bilingual flyers, the ACLU has put some out to tell people their rights. There's a couple videos. I've reposted all that to my Facebook pages to try and be disseminated. We need to get information out so people know what their rights are, so they don't make a mistake that ends up causing them to be arrested. Besides that, I think protesting is what we can do.
So do or don't pursue sanctuary city status?
Well, yeah, I think you also need to talk to your local governments because what was going on before this. I do criminal defense amongst other things, and we had our local sheriff's offices that were sort of processing people and turning them over, and our Attorney General wrote actually an opinion about a year ago which said that if ICE doesn't come to pick somebody up, the sheriff's allowed to release them. ICE was taking forever to come pick people up after they were being told they were there, and so a lot of sheriffs didn't think that state taxpayers should be paying to house people because ICE can't get their act together to come pick them up. I'm not sure where Fairfax is on that, when they've started to release people if ICE doesn't come. But also, the county has been affirmatively checking people's immigration status when they come through the system. Obviously felonies are a big deal, and if somebody's committing felonies, I don't think they should be present in our community at all. But they shouldn't be for random misdemeanors and minor stuff. I'm not as concerned about that. So you might want to talk to your local government, your local sheriff. Stacy Kincaid, your sheriff's at, you're in Alexandria, your sheriff is, who's your sheriff now? Dana Lawhorn. Contact Dana Lawhorn about what's going on in the Alexandria Sheriff's Office, the Fairfax County Sheriff's Office, and talk to our local government, because they have a lot more ability to do things about this than we do, given where they stand. So that's what I would suggest.
Thank you. We thank you all. We see you doing your work. Thanks a lot.
You're welcome. One, to add to it, I would say number 4 is come down and testify in Richmond when these bad bills come before us, because we had in the House, we had some anti-immigrant bills, and we had anti-sanctuary city bills that passed pretty much party line, and there wasn't, we don't have enough people testifying against them. So we need you to come down. I know it's hard to say, if you don't know when these things are popping up, but monitor the General Assembly website and definitely look that up. It's what is it, Virginia? What's the website? I don't know, but it's Google Virginia General Assembly. But really, and you can also watch. You can watch what the other side says, and you can see the video, and you can get an idea of where their arguments are, so you can counter those arguments. But the more people we have for any issue, coming down to Richmond is critical. People will drive 7-8 hours from the rest of the state to come there, and yet we have a tougher time getting people. It's only an hour and a half. Please come down and monitor our Facebook and our Twitter, because we will put down times, and we'll be calling you to come down and do things like that, especially next year. And the other thing is, we're like we said earlier, the governor's going to veto all these awful bills, so we're in a good place. But November is a new election. So if you don't show up in November, all of this is going to be bad news.
And just one other item to mention, I was talking about network statewide. There are folks who happen to be Republicans from Northern Virginia who don't necessarily agree with the 3 of us. So it's not that you have to talk to people in Bristol and south of Richmond or Lynchburg, but even people in Fairfax, there's about four or five of those, and then if you go to Prince William and Loudoun. So if you have friends, whether they're in Westgate Precinct here or Springfield or Chantilly, there are other folks who need to be heard from their constituents.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Hi. Thursday night, one of my ESL students told me about the raids. He said he'd seen it on television, and I don't do social media or watch television news, but I came home immediately and searched the internet and have been reading the Washington Post, and there was no news about the Route 1 calendar. The patch ignored it. They were busy with something else. What can be done to make sure this gets into the news so people who are concerned but maybe not 21st century up on media learn immediately?
Thanks for your question. I'm pretty sure it's on the front page of the Post today. It was in my driveway. I didn't pick it up, but it's on the front page of their website right now about the immigration raids. But they didn't mention Route. They mentioned Alexandria, but they didn't mention Route 1. So I think the news is just starting to get out about what happened on Route 1. And we do have Steve Hunt from Mount Vernon Voice here today. I'm sure he's covering it. But yeah, call the Post. 202-334-6000 and tell them to start paying attention too. So that's how I'd answer that. Here you go.
My name is Betty Lundy, and I live in Vinewood Lake. And there's 542 townhouses over there. I've been there probably 25 years. So for the last 3 years, I've been canvassing my neighborhood. And I came up with 125 cars that had Maryland tags. That's living in Virginia. So I called Richmond and I asked them, could I canvass that? Can I write the tag number down with the address? And it's been over 30 days, and they said yes, as long as I don't go into the, the problem. And I said, I'll go at the DOD, Department of Defense, because I'm military dependent and I know they have them, but they don't do that anymore. So I sent it in to Richmond. I got it notarized and I sent them in to Richmond. Now this is, that's just 125 in my community that you all are not getting any tax money from. And just imagine all the other places here in Virginia that they're doing that and you're not getting any tax. And I got 2 cars. I pay taxes I'm a homeowner,
Okay.
and I'm self-employed. I pay a lot of taxes.
We'll address that.
Okay.
So, appreciate that question, and you know, Supervisor McKay and Delegate Sickles, you live in Lee District actually, and the two of them get, huh? Yeah, but okay, yeah, but Sickles is, yeah, right, it's in Paul's district, but Delegate Sickles passed legislation specifically about this issue, I think about 2 years ago, at Jeff McKay's request, to increase the fine that could be levied for people that do that. And so, and I know Supervisor McKay he's directed code enforcement, I think, to do some specific enforcement efforts, and you really ought to talk to him about focusing on. But I just want to say that a big reason why people get their cars plated in Maryland is because they're not legally present, and they have to go to Maryland to get an ID. And Virginia DMV will not plate their car. And so part of that is because of this immigration problem. And so that's partly why I put in my bill to allow people to get a Virginia ID card if they live in Virginia. So, you know, there's some people that are cheating, and there's other people that are doing it because it's the only way they can get their car plated. Because that's where they get the driver's license.
Another way, they don't have to pay that tax.
I understand. I understand. And you know, property taxes are probably what, 20% of the county budget, and so it counts. But you know, you got to talk to Supervisor McKay about focusing on your neighborhood, because that's where the enforcement lies, is with local government. But one of the causes of it again is because of this whole immigration thing that the federal government will not deal with. And then I'm kind of hoping they don't deal with it now, but in any event, that's I think the answer to your question. Okay.
But they buy their cars here in Virginia. After the 30-day paper tags are expired, they end up with Maryland tags.
Yeah, and I think I explained to you why a lot of them do it, but there are some people who are breaking the law. I agree with you. There's some people that, there's some people that are breaking the law because they want to break the law. There's others that are doing it because they have to, because it's the only place they can get a car plated. But talk to Supervisor McKay about having the county code enforcement people come to your neighborhood and focus on it.
Thank you.
Hi there, thank you very, very much. This has been great. My name is Destiny Eamon, and this is my first town hall meeting. I actually picked up, I'm a transplant from California, I picked up the Virginia House of Delegates activity book, and I learned a lot about how Virginia politics works from this, which gives you some sense of, hopefully, some sense of the additional energy that is happening right now with regard to people in the state getting more involved and putting themselves in outside of their comfort zone. And so my question actually involves connecting the dots a little bit, because I think what we've been hearing is that coming into these meetings and talking with our local folks is the best way to get involved and to have the most impact, right? But with regard to the raids or any other of these kind of big hot button issues, I think what might be missing is connectivity between what you guys can do, which is somewhat limited, and what other organizations can do, which could be broader. So you mentioned, for instance, that you wouldn't want to necessarily block immigration raids from happening, although there are actually groups that are working, so for instance in Arizona, to have folks, privileged white people, who are less likely to have a bad and negative experience with the criminal justice system, come out and actually block these from happening, which also increases media attention and normalizes this in the media so that people will continue talking about it. And as part of a multicultural community here, I think we have an investment to make in making sure that doesn't happen. So I appreciate all the content. My question is, do you guys have recommendations for local community organizations that are on this specific issue that we can get involved with?
Yeah. The ACLU has a Virginia chapter and a Northern Virginia chapter. That's one resource that I would, and there's a variety of organizations. And then there's also the Virginia Legal Aid Justice Center, and as I said, the Virginia New Majority, which does a lot of electoral work, but they're concerned particularly with immigrants and empowering immigrants, speaking up for immigrants, for workers. And it's not just one. One of the things you can do, this is an election year, so you can pick out the candidates you like, and no pressure, but there's one standing this way. The candidates you like, whether you're a Democrat or Republican, and there are a number of Republicans in Northern Virginia who will have Democratic opponents. another number of Democrats running for re-election, and you can get involved with their campaigns. If you're in Mount Vernon, I know the Mount Vernon Democratic Committee would welcome you. If you're a Republican, there might be some here. I'm assuming the Republican Committee would welcome folks, well, maybe not people who share your views on immigration, but I think they'd welcome more members. And there are other organizations across the state. There's a group called Equality Virginia that focuses on LGBT rights. As I said, ACLU and NOW. There's a group called One Virginia 2021 that deals with redistricting. And there's a group called Progress VA, Progress Virginia. Not as many people know about it, but this is a great organization to get information from because it includes a wide array of issues. Now, it's not an organization that necessarily goes door to door, but you should check them out too. And lastly, I mentioned the Virginia Interfaith Center. You know, these are all organizations worth following on the internet. If you see me later, I'll give you the list.
We also have the VIC here in Mount Vernon area, and VIC is Virginia Ventures in Community. I'm sorry, Ventures. I've got this whole Virginia thing. Ventures in Community. I've been a member for like 30 years. I can't even. But Ventures in Community is really good. It's an interfaith group as well, and they meet pretty much monthly. And these are the kind of issues that they talk about. Don't get us wrong. We think getting out in front and demonstrating is important. But we don't want you to go to every elementary school on Monday. I mean, I think if you follow us, and there's a good blog, Blue Virginia, because you might be scaring kids, and it won't be at every elementary school. I think we need to find out where they're going to be, and then get there, and that's where it's going to matter. I mean, protest where we can, but
that's what I challenge you guys to be thinking.
Well, we're doing that, we will be tweeting. I mean, as soon as we find anything out, follow us, and you'll know, and we'll be the first to know. Hopefully, we'll be the first to know. And then, yeah, tweet at us, and we'll tweet back. I mean, that's the whole Twitter thing. But anyway, Scott's got some more.
Yeah, there's another group called VACALAO, VACALAO, Virginia Coalition of Latino Organizations, and they're kind of the umbrella group for Latino organizations in Northern Virginia. One of my frustrations has been that the Latino community is not very organized outside of Alexandria and Arlington, and there's a lot of folks down the Route 1 corridor all the way down to Dumfries Triangle and up into Manassas Park, and I think this issue might cause them to get organized or more organized down this way. So I think if people reach out to those organizations and offer to start going out and meeting folks, you'll start to have more to do. Like the Audubon Estates Trailer Park right here is 800, I don't like when I call it a trailer park, 800 unit manufactured home park. I think it's 80% Latino. And I had a meeting over there with about 40 families about 6 months ago talking about driver's licenses. People have been here for like 10, 15 years and still can't get a Virginia driver's license. And so there's people out there that need to be organized and led. Most of them don't, they're not going to come to a meeting like this. They don't interact with the government, they don't reach out, they're not reading the Washington Post, or they're not on our email lists, but they're out there and they're making a living, they have children in our schools, and we need to reach out to them and bring them in and get them organized and be able to, that's how we can help. So you talk to an organization like VACALAO, maybe they can give you the tools to start doing that. So, Voice? Yeah, Voice too. I think is Kerry Ken still here? There he is. Kerry back. Kerry's your name. Kerry's the pastor at Rising Hope Mission Church on Route 1. He actually had some of his, he told me that he thinks a couple of his parishioners got picked up. Okay. And so I know he's been, you might want to talk to Kerry as well. He's active with Voice. He comes down and sees me with people every year, and that's another organization that might help. So.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Joyce Ross, and I'm concerned with the rise in hate groups and my fear for myself, my granddaughter, my friends of Jewish faith. There has been so many bomb threats. Every time we go to synagogue, there's a lovely police officer to protect us. I don't think people are aware of how many threats there have been to our group. I used to live in Skokie, and I lived there during the Nazi March. Everything that's going on right now, the attack against the Muslims, the Jews, the minorities, it's scaring the heck out of me. What is going on to protect us, and what can we do? And how do you tell your children? How do you tell your grandchildren that somebody wants to blow you up?
If I could just briefly address that first. Not only is it happening here, but in Richmond, at the Richmond Jewish Community Center, they've had a number of bomb threats from white supremacist groups. We have had police in Fairfax County and other areas who've been there at synagogues and other vulnerable places, which is great. It's a shame that they have to be, but it's great that they're there showing the police presence. I don't know if you remember the Anti-Defamation League or if you've been to their website. That's one source of ways that you can take action.
You know, some of the resolutions that are brought before us in the General Assembly are hateful, and so that's an opportunity for you to come down and testify again, and we speak out against them and we vote against them. And this is an issue that's rearing its ugly head again, and it's you know, we don't need to point too many our finger. We can just go across the Potomac River. We know where it's starting. So we have, this is, you know, we're living in tough times right now, and we're here we're kind of doing a rearguard action down there in the General Assembly in Richmond and trying to do what we can, but certainly you've got to do just what you did now, is testify before everybody and let people know that this is a problem, and that you've got your synagogue is being targeted, as many are, and we're just not going to put up with it, and we're going to keep fighting down there in Richmond. We're going to fight here when we hear about it, and we know about it. We're going to let you guys know. We're going to be on Facebook, Twitter. We're going to be at the synagogue when something happens, and God forbid it does. I mean, we're here for you, and we'll listen, and we'll be out there as much as we can. We're not going to let them bully us. We're going to keep fighting back, and we appreciate your testimony.
Could we just have a show of hands, how many people here with the Women's March? Okay, that was one of the most powerful direct actions that I think we've seen in recent years, or since maybe the March on Washington. And I think now more than ever, people need to stand up. We're kind of the system, and a lot of people want to do more than just the system. So working through these groups is great, but direct action is great, and social media is great, because when you have social media, you can really, I mean, that whole Women's March started from one woman in Hawaii's Facebook post, which is great. So we're gonna take more questions after Delegate Surovell addresses this. Senator, I keep calling him Delegate. We were in the House of Delegates together for a number of years. But who's the last person in line back there? Could you raise your hand?
Susan Brender.
Okay, we're gonna go for, we can go to 11:30, but why don't we just say that you'll have the last question when we get to you, and that we'll be available afterwards to address people one-on-one.
And Mr. Ross, I think one of the things that, I don't think I heard you mention it, but you know, the Muslim community is terrified right now. I've had a lot of constituents Facebook message me, email me about that. You know, there is a mosque on Route 1.
My niece is Muslim. I mean, we're an American family of Muslims, Jews,
I think
and blacks.
the more our religious organizations bond together, especially the minority, well, actually all of them. I think there's plenty of Christians that want to fight back about this too. But there's a mosque on Route 1. A lot of people don't realize it. It's right next to Boswell, right across the McDonald's, sort of back in the neighborhood. But in the Prince William part of my seat, there's some significant mosques. And I tell you, the Muslim community is really concerned. So I just think you need to reach the Virginia Interfaith Coalition. And know that the Mount Vernon Unitarian Church is very involved in that. Getting involved in those kinds of organizations, I think, is one way you can start to organize to push back on that stuff and doing what you did today. So thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah, and again, Ventures in Community, and the mosque is a valuable partner there, and they're very good. So everybody should get involved in that. And here comes somebody who is very involved, Mary Payton. I know she goes to the Ventures Community.
Thanks. Hi, I'm Mary Payton. I just wanted to say that Ventures in Community did release a statement recently where all the There's about 60 organizations, most of them faith-based, but also nonprofit organizations, calling for tolerance and good behavior and no hate stuff between people in this area, and asking people to treat each other with respect and caring. I wanted also to just mention something on redistricting, which is a lot more boring than some of the other things that are going on. But I wanted to tell people that there is an NGO that's really pushing for fair redistricting, and if you want to do something about that, you can go home and look up onevirginia2021.org. There's a petition to sign, and they'll put you through to people that you can contact, like right away. I think it's coming up in the House at the VAD committee on Tuesday. So I just also wanted to ask people if there's any more tips they can give on things people can do to see if we can get this through this year. I guess we have to pass the bill 2 sessions in a row, and then we have to get it on the constitutional amendment on the public ballot before we can get fair redistricting. So what do we do next?
It's going to the House P&E committee Tuesday. So go to lis.virginia.gov, G-O-V. LIS, you spell out Virginia.gov, and you can look up the P&E committee. You can get their emails. You can send them emails right away on Monday. Do that. If you know anybody that live in their districts, definitely do that. But you know, the more emails and phone calls are important. As much as you can do, that's critical. I see Matthew's here. P&E stands for Privileges and Elections. Privileges and Elections. They didn't put me on that committee, unfortunately. I'm on Courts of Justice, and I'm on the Ethics and Civil Subcommittees, and I'm on City, County, Towns. So if you've got any legal questions, I'm a good one there. But you know, hopefully we'll get it through there, and it did get through the Senate. So that these guys worked it really well.
One more time, lis.virginia.gov.
Correct.
I have one brief comment and 2 brief questions, so I'll be brief overall. First, the question about what can you do for undocumented immigrants? Housing, they can find jobs, they can't find places to live. This also affects the state police who are earning $36,000 a year. If you have a guest house, if you have a room over your garage, if you have an extra room, these are folks who move typically from different housing places on a month-to-month basis because they're being abused by people who are renting out at exorbitant costs. So that's one thing you can do personally in accordance with Christian faith or other faiths. First question is Embark Richmond. If you're familiar with what's happened with the Bach Farm redevelopment, 45 stories, revolt in this community, right? And yet the Embark Richmond has all 6-story buildings, maybe higher than that. Has anyone given any thought to whether the community actually wants 5 or 6-story buildings in a community and the impact it will have? I mean, given what happened with the Bach Farm, that's one. 2, school funding. What's being done, if anything? I've welcomed the thought that there's been some progress in persuading, you know, the legislature to some of the other things the senators and delegates have. You've talked about, you've gotten movement on other issues. Is there anything to change taxing authorities for counties and cities to equalize that, or to change the school funding formula? Is there any hope at all on the horizon that we won't be having these $130 million budget deficits where they're looking to cut essential programs and services, which really hurts the poor kids more than anyone else? Thank you.
Let me also say we do have, you asked about local groups. There's some great groups that are doing housing, Good Shepherd Housing, New Hope Housing, United Community Ministries. They are also out there in the front lines fighting a good fight and helping, especially helping immigrants with housing. That's really important. But let me give Senator Surovell to talk to you a little bit about your other issues. As far as the education, I mean, well, here, let me hear you.
Listen, a lot of people like to throw darts at the LCI format, the local composite index. That's how our schools are funded in Virginia. And it really does not benefit Northern Virginia very much, the way that formula works. But it isn't going to change. And a lot of people like to stand up and complain about it, politicians especially, and say we want to change it, we can't change it, whatever, but it isn't. Let me explain to you why. First of all, so you understand how it works, the way the education dollars flow in Virginia was a result of a lawsuit probably like 40 years ago. And it basically, they look at how much property you have to tax, and how much income you have, and how many students you have. And like the rest of the state can't compete with Northern Virginia on either income or property value. And so we end up getting a really low amount of money out of that formula, right? And changing that formula is not a Democratic or Republican issue. There are some Democratic jurisdictions that do very well. Prince William County gets 50% of its school budget paid by the state. Fairfax gets 20%. There are some majority minority cities and majority minority counties actually along the North Carolina border. They get 80% of their budget paid by the state. And so if you want to talk about the reality, the average teacher salary in Grayson County is $35,000 a year. The average teacher salary in Arlington County for a mid-year career teacher is $81,000 a year. So if you want to talk about changing LCI, what you're really talking about is taking money from jurisdictions that pay the teachers $35,000 and giving it to jurisdictions that pay the teachers $81,000. And that's not an argument you're going to win with anybody, right? And so I would love to change it, but the reality is the problem is there's not enough money, right? And the state doesn't have enough money to give around. And there's some tweaks that I'd like to make, like for example, counting special ed, considering special ed populations or ESL populations, or English as a second language, some other things. But these kinds of tweaks just engender all kinds of violent reactions from everybody. And the only time these formulas have ever changed is the result of lawsuits. And for the last 4 years, I've been telling the school board, if you want to change the formula, file a lawsuit. You need to get to court to prove that it's not fair, it's not equitable, it's not considering the right factors. And the only way that's going to change is with a lawsuit. And so that's what the county, if they're serious about it, needs to do. In terms of taxing authority, if the county wants more taxing authority, they need to come to us and tell us, here's what we want, and here we're going to help you push it, and we're going to make that part of our legislative agenda. And I haven't gotten that request in 8 years. There's been a lot of talk about more authority, but if they want to do it, they need to make some effort and put some effort behind it. So, I'm happy to help. I tried helping once. I put in a bill to give the county meals tax authority without a referendum. Nobody knows county lobbyists showed up to speak to my bill. So I'm standing ready, willing, and able to help, but it has to be a partnership. So on that's your answer. On the embark piece, the Route 1, the condition of the Route 1 corridor has been my number one issue since I got elected. And Senator Puller and I pushed through the Route 1 multimodal study about, I think it was in the 2011 session. We did a 2-year study. They came back and said that what you need on Route 1 is more transit, right? The only way you can get transit funded is going through the federal government. The federal government will pick up half the cost of transit cost, but they'll only do it if you meet certain requirements. And one of them is you have to have more dense community, because all the studies have shown that land use and transportation are linked together. And especially with transit, if you don't have enough people living around the metro stops, or most people living around the BRT stops, then you won't have enough people on the bus, and that's not a worthwhile investment for everybody. And so the FTA has requirements that you have certain amounts of density within a half mile of stations. And that's why the study recommended that we go way up in the air in very specific locations. Not everywhere, but just in very specific locations. And so right now the county is trying to implement that so that we can be eligible for federal funding. Because I don't know where we could find $1 billion. This whole project is about a $2.1 billion project end to end. The state doesn't have $1 billion. I don't think anybody here wants their taxes raised on their real estate taxes to generate $1 billion, right? Just saving some idea. I think it's the CTB's budget for this year, the statewide transportation capital budget, I think was $800 million, right? Statewide, right? And we need $2.1 billion. So, the only way we're going to get this money is by increasing our densities. And I think out on Route 1, there's a lot of people that are interested in seeing that. What we're talking about is basically the Route 1 corridor looking more like Arlington. And in Arlington, they've done it very tastefully. You got the neighborhoods right next to some of the higher density projects, and people are flocking to Arlington, not just because it's close, but it's very livable. It's walkable, and you have retail and restaurants and jobs all right there. And that's kind of what we're aiming at. And I think what you're hearing about Bach Farm is you're talking about density right in the middle of a neighborhood, nowhere near transit, nowhere near this other stuff. It's just kind of out of place. I think that's probably the reaction why you're hearing that. But so that's kind of how I'd answer that. I'm excited about the embark stuff. I think the Route 1 corridor is an exciting place to live for the next 20 years. I think you're going to see a lot more people flocking and wanting to move here, and I'm really happy about it. And the last thing I'll say is that the only way we're going to get our state funding in 2 years is if the embark process is done. And so, you know, we've been working really hard to keep that process going. But the Mount Vernon community has a sort of reputation in some circles of having a lot of opinions. And yeah, can you believe that? And the last time we tried to reach resolution on Route 1 about 20 years ago, it bogged down. Nobody could agree on anything, and that's why we haven't got anything done. And so we got to reach a final agreement about this stuff so we can move forward. And I think we're getting there. But you know, pay attention to the embark process and make sure your views are heard there as part of that. Is what I'd say.
Yeah, I would just echo that. And the embark process has been a very public process, and there's going to be a lot more public hearings on it. So I think you can, you know, thank you supervisors for involving all of us in making this happen. And that's where you've got your opportunity to weigh in. And we do need to have it finished by the end of this 2017, by December. That has to be done so the comp plan can be, you know, updated, and then we can get this state money. And without that, we can't get the federal money, and nothing will happen, and we'll have the same problems we have now for the next 30, 40 years. The other thing I wanted to say is in the budget, in this big budget here, we did increase on the House side. I'm not sure what it's on the Senate side. It's up to 40% of the lottery money now goes to schools. So it was at 26% last year. It should be 100%. I mean, that's what years ago we were told that, and way before I was in the House of Delegates, and even before these guys, they raided that money and they used it for other things. And they've been doing that, and they did that for many years, and we had some economic downturns and they had to. But for now, moving forward, we're working every year to increase that. So if you do buy a lottery ticket, you can be sure that 40% of it anyway is going to the school. You're not going to get any money because I don't think anybody wins. But anyway, here we go.
Hi, I'm from Mason Neck, and our Citizens Association recently sent Senator Surovell a thank you letter for his fight against coal ash pollution. But I mainly want to congratulate Senator Ebbin for the progress on marijuana reform, the driver's license bill, and the Crime Commission study of decriminalization. My question is, does the Crime Commission have a reputation for doing objective analysis, and does the legislature actually listen to them? Because if those conditions are met, we've got it made.
The Crime Commission staff is a professional staff that does objective analysis. I should say it was referred there for study. They come up with their work plan after the session and decide what they're going to study. But the former chair of the Crime Commission, Senator Norman, Republican leader in the Senate, has requested this as well. So I'm hopeful. But they do an objective analysis. Just because they do something doesn't mean that we're going to immediately move forward with it. But this is a big step.
Good morning. I'm watching this whole process, and I'm very encouraged to see that we have states who are going to be willing to stand up and say we are an important part of this nation. So thank you very much for that. I have just one small question, very unimportant. I'm just wondering about why the hybrid cars that used to have HOV status now no longer do. The newer hybrid cars do not. That's question number one. And two, just a comment as far as, I don't think that we have batteries that can store energy yet that's good enough for that. And I'm assuming you're hoping that passing a bill will make the research quicker and faster. And the last thing is that I think as far as pipelines are concerned, my information is that they are about as safe as anything for transporting oil. And I think as long as we use plastic as much as we do, whether it's cell phones or toothbrushes or whatever else, we are going to have oil. And until we cut back on some of that, we're going to have to bring it in somewhere. So it's all get solar.
First of all, on your pipeline question, the new pipelines are actually not for oil, they're for natural gas.
Well, regardless.
But they're for natural gas for electricity production. And so if Virginia had a real solar program, we wouldn't need them.
I do have all solar.
Good, you're all solar, excellent. Well, you're one of the rare ones. Virginia doesn't have the tax credits that any of our surrounding states have. We don't have Adam did a bill for a solar funding authority, I think, low interest loans, but nobody put any money in it. But Adam created the fund, so we have it there. But if Virginia had a real renewable energy program, then we wouldn't need gas. We would need these pipelines or anything. So, anyways, that I agree with you. The pipelines in general are safe in general, but that's what the new ones are for. On your other question about the what was your first question again? Oh, hybrid cars. So
Very unimportant.
yeah, so Senator inheriting Senator Puller's Senate seat. My district, by the way, now runs. My district. Anybody know where 610 is? Route 610, Garrisonville Road. That's the end of my district. Then after you get off the exit there, you go all the way down the Whitewater Peninsula for 20 minutes, still in my district. And you go out to the west for 20 minutes, out to North Stafford High School. That's where my district ends. I have more I-95 commuters than I think just about anybody in the state Senate. And so the hybrid exemption I've been hearing about. When I bought a 2004 Honda Civic Hybrid, and I still drive it, and it's one of the only cars that had the special plate that allows you to drive on the lanes. And that was one of the reasons I got it. It's a car that's 240,000 miles on now. And I'm kind of holding out, but in any event, when we did the hot lanes on 95 and on the Beltway, and now coming on 66, the problem is you can't key a transponder off a license plate. We got rid of the hybrid exemption, I think, in like 05, 06, because it was way too popular, and we limited it. Everybody that originally got it was grandfathered, but all the new hybrids didn't, because it was way too popular, and then the HOV lanes were filling up with cars. And I think about 4 years ago, we passed the law that gave the Department of Transportation, VDOT, the discretion to stop it at some point in the future. You can still use them in Alexandria, like going up Washington Street. You're still allowed to use those if you have a hybrid.
But not the new ones, not the new
The hot lanes you can't, because there's no way to tell a transponder that, in certain places, whatever, if you have the right plate, it's too complicated data-wise, and also the federal law says if the speeds drop below 50 miles an hour, that they have to manage the tolls in a way to keep the speeds at 50 miles an hour or higher. And that's why you saw $30 tolls going out to Tyson's Corner on the Beltway. And if we opened it up to hybrids, they would shut down. They wouldn't make any money. And when those contracts were negotiated, that's what they were negotiated to. That's really all I can tell you. So, but
we're still using gas instead of.
We are. Yeah. Now I'd like to point out that Senator Ebbin was a big fighter with me on the fighting the hybrid tax. When Governor McDonald tried to put a special tax on hybrid cars, Senator Ebbin and I got 10,000 people to sign a petition and got that tax repealed, or mostly repealed. Eventually totally repealed, yeah. We got it reduced from 100 to 65, and then the next session it got repealed. But Adam and I led the fight on that, and we thought it was crazy to be taxing you for being environmental. Anyways, and you had a last question.
Well, on the solar stuff, you were talking about the storage, and exactly what you said. It needs to go forward in order to further the technology, in order to make solar energy even more cost efficient and viable. Now, you asked a little bit about solar from the state. The governor proposed $1.1 million in funding to help low interest loans to spur development of solar energy. And last year he had some things for solar energy. There are companies like Google and Facebook that want to locate, Amazon also, that want to locate in states with renewable energy. And that's why you see a lot of them using wind in Iowa for their data centers. They want to be here if we have that. And that's not been moved forward. In fact, we cut that small amount of money, so that's a disappointment. At the same time, we made sure to raise what we're spending to commemorate Jamestown and Yorktown from $5 million to $10 million. Governor thought $5 million was enough, but the Senate seemed to think that we needed 10. So.
Thank you very much for all you do.
Maybe. Maybe. Yes, maybe. He can, will he? I think. He can amend it.
Hello, my name is Elaine Peterman, and I'm a senior citizen living on my Social Security check, and I'm looking for housing. It's very hard to find housing in Fairfax County in particular. The waiting lists are years and years and years, and we wonder why there's so much homelessness on the Route 1 corridor. So I'm wondering, what can I do, or what can we do to advocate for more low-income senior housing and housing for people with disabilities on disability checks?
Peter, one thing I want to tell you is that as part of this embark process, the whole redo of Route 1 that we're studying right now, a lot of people have said to me, what's going to happen to all the people that live there right now, right? Because when we bring metro or we bus rapid transit, we build big new town centers out there. A lot of people are afraid that means all this stuff's going to get bulldozed and gone. The federal funding requirements, if we want to get federal money to do this, the feds require no net loss of affordable housing. And so we have to do it in a way that preserves the affordable housing that we have today. And the county's affordable housing ordinance does not apply to any building that's more than 4 stories. So the county needs to change its ordinance. And as part of this embark process, one of the things I have not heard is any discussion about affordable housing. And we need to make sure that there's some discussion about affordable housing as part of this embark process. And so the next time there's an embark meeting, you need to be at that embark meeting and say to them, what are you doing about affordable housing? Okay, because that needs to be part of the discussion, and the county needs to start taking steps on it. And so that's something that you specifically can do and ought to do. I think Paul wanted to say a couple things too.
Yeah, and I did mention the local nonprofits like New Hope Housing, Good Shepherd Housing, UCM. They can help you if you haven't already talked to them as well with helping you to identify housing. Low-income housing is a big problem, there's no doubt. And that's why, I mean, we have to work at the state level with our local Fairfax County Board of Supervisors, and this embark process it has a lot of positive opportunity, and we've got to make sure that these new buildings include a lot of low-income housing. We want people to be able to live and work in the same community. That takes cars off of Route 1. That allows people to have jobs and be able to shop and live and work all in the same area. So that's what this is going to do. And we're going to have good transportation with that rapid bus transit in the middle lanes. Again, that's going to help us with our traffic. We all will take that bus, just like we all use Metro now. So it's going to be very beneficial, and I think you'll see that happen. Now, granted, that's going to be a while, a few years down the road, hopefully as fast as possible. For you now, I would definitely talk to folks from UCM and see if he's got good contact. But wait till after the meeting, and I'll talk to you, and I'll give you some numbers to call too. Okay. But thank you for coming.
How do I find out about this embark meeting?
And we can get you also. Let me just say one last thing is we talked about the Twitter handles. Look for us, Krizek for VA, KRIZEK FOR VA, at Krizek for Virginia. That's my Twitter. At Surovell, at Adam Ebbin. Those are so we tweet out stuff like that. When embark's happening, and we try to let people know. Supervisor Stork, again, he's your contact person for embark. But stay here, and we'll talk to you, and I'll give you some information about the next. I can look it up and tell you. But thank you very much. We've got 2 more. Adriana's going to be the last one. But then, okay, here's the senator.
Ma'am, Miss, the lady who just spoke. I would also encourage you, Carrie, could you raise your hand in the back, Reverend Kincannon? Oh, we left. I'm sorry. We'll see us afterwards, and we'll try and put you in touch with the right people.
I know, Carrie.
My name is Carolyn Price, and I got 2 questions. What is the Democrats going to do to help people to get out to go and do the local voting? Because that's where it all starts. We go out for the victory for the president. People knocking on our doors all times of day and night, but when it comes to local, that's where it starts. We got to get our Democrats, that is you, representing us. So you have to get on board and get people out here to vote. We know that you're outnumbered, but you still can stand and get a little backbone and get people out to the poll. We need it. And my second question is kind of lady with the lady. I want to know, what are we going to do about rent control in Virginia? Because it seems like that is the problem, because people can't stay in one place for no more than a year. We got people, got kids, they go to 10 different schools before they get in high school because they can't deal with the rent. We're overcrowded houses, apartments. And we gotta do some kind of rent control to help the people to stay there at least 2 or 3 years to get themselves together.
And to answer your first question about us getting out people to vote in the local elections, all we do is run for office in the odd year, including the lowest turnout year. We run an operation to knock on the doors of people to vote. We try and register people to vote. Senator Surovell has developed or really mastered an online operation that when he goes door to door, he helps people register. But we need folks like you also to get involved, leaders in the community, and folks who just want to help to join your local Democratic committee. Even if you don't want to join, to volunteer in the off year. There's just 3 of us, but there are about 200 of you. So join us, help us in those off year elections too.
Good questions, Ms. Price. Thank you. We believe, I mean, you heard Senator Ebbin. We want everybody to vote. We're the party of inclusiveness. We're the party that wants folks to vote. And I apologize to my Republican friends out there, but you guys know it. We need to get people to vote. And we had an election just 2-3 weeks, I guess about a month ago, for a special election in the House of Delegates down in the Tidewater area. A woman who went to Groveton High School, lived up here over off of Shiver Drive, and she moved down to that area about 15-20 years ago and became a teacher, and she ran for the first time, and she did a great campaign. She raised a lot of money. She worked hard. She went and door knocked on 5,000 doors, and she lost by 320 votes. And 20,000 people who voted for Hillary in November did not come out and vote. So what are we going to do? We've got everybody here. We have all got to just remind people how important it is to vote on these general elections, or in these House votes that we have, the governor's vote race that's coming up. You're going to have a chance in June for the primary. You're going to have a chance again in November. So it's incumbent upon all of us, and we will certainly be doing our best, and I'll be knocking on all your doors. I'll probably come to your house. But we got to get people, and I'll remind you, Ms. Price, but really that's important. And here's Senator Surovell, who is the preeminent voter drive guy, I tell you. Nobody knocks on more doors than he does.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Paul and Adam. Appreciate that. So, I've knocked, I think, 24,000 doors in 3 elections. And I got a big scar on my leg from the dog that bit me last election. Yeah, bit right through my pants. In any event, there's two things. Number one is you can now register to vote electronically. You don't have to have a piece of paper. You can do it with any phone or a website. That's made it a lot easier. And to get registered and to keep your registration up to date. The second thing is our governor, the State Board of Elections approved and our governor implemented it, the ability to apply to vote by mail electronically. I created a website that does the same thing. It's called just votedemocratic.com, I think. I'm sorry, democraticabsentee.com, that's it. Democraticabsentee.com. Anybody can use it, you don't get Democrat or Republican, doesn't matter. But if you fill out the website, it automatically transmits your absentee ballot application electronically. You don't have to fill it out, write it, put it in the mail or anything. And just about everybody here is eligible to vote by mail. I mean, I see you use a cane to get around. Yes, you can claim the disability question. You don't have to vote at a polling place.
I prefer going.
Yeah. I know. A lot of people tell me they prefer going, and then there's a big storm or there's traffic and things happen and they end up not being able to go. So, I mean, I have people tell me all the time they wanted to vote. There was a traffic jam on 95. They work in D.C. They couldn't get back. Something happened. Something happened in life. Yeah, we had an earthquake one year, I think. Yeah. So I'm just telling you, like I tell everybody just vote by mail, and especially the folks in the Route 1 corridor that they have to work 2 or 3 jobs. You know, stuff comes up in life. But there are all kinds of reasons you can use to vote. I mean, technically, if you say I'm going to get a hamburger in Alexandria on election day, that counts. I'm totally serious. It says
if you're 80 years old, it doesn't count.
Yeah, if you're 80 years old, it doesn't count. But, so anyways, I went door to door and I signed up 1,000 people to vote by mail at their door, and I only offered it to people who had never voted in state elections before, and I signed up 1,000 people to vote, and about 700 of them turned it back in when the ballot came. So we really need to push voting by mail. 100,000 people registered in my district. in the 36th district, only 32,000 people voted in the election I ran in. Okay? So that's what happens in these off-year elections when people don't vote for president. So I think voting by mail is the biggest thing we can do, getting people to do it and getting these tools out so people know they're eligible, they know they can vote by mail. So that's what I really think we ought to do. And then, the applications. And the second thing I would say on your rent control issue, in the last time we did redistricting in 2011, the population in the 44th district, now Paul now represents, in this community, actually grew faster than all of Virginia, right? When you think about it, you know, where were they building new houses in the 44th district between 2000 and 2010? They weren't, right? But our population grew faster than the entire state. And why is that? There's a couple reasons. Number one, we have elderly people that passed on and new families came in with children. That was part of it. You know, this area had become very, 2, 2, 3, 6, 7, 8, and 9 had become very gray. And some of that changed. But you also, when I went out and knocked those doors on Route 1 of those apartments, I was finding 2 families living in one apartment. There's a lot of people cramming into units on Route 1, and a lot of townhouses, some other single-family houses, and it's all because of the affordability of housing. And again, this embark process is the vision for our community for the next 40 years. And it's critical that people get out there and articulate what they want our community to look like. And affordable housing has not been part of the discussion. It needs to be. So I would encourage you, just like the last woman who spoke, or the 2 people ago, get to that embark meeting. The next public meeting will probably be in April, I think. I'm not sure if you use Twitter or Facebook, or if you have email, but you get on my email list, and all of us, or all of our email lists, we put out this information on all of our things, so you can find out when the meeting's going to be.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, before I turn over to Paul, I forgot one thing, which is, Kate, can you wave your hand if you turn around? That's Kate Spears. She's the chair of the Mount Vernon District Democratic Committee. I see a lot of people in here. Give her a hand. I see a lot of people in here who want to take direct action. That's a great place to be. And in terms of voting, what Delegate Krizek did by getting the DMV mobile van the 3rd Wednesday of the month at the Sherwood Hall Lane Library,
That's good.
that is where you can get an ID. If you don't have a Virginia driver's license or a good photo ID, you can get a free, actually from them, you get a Virginia State identification card if you don't want to go all the way to the government center. You can get an annual voter ID that, I'm sorry, not a voter ID, an ID that would take the place of a license if you need it. So that's one thing that's helpful. And we need people to help register voters. We need people who live in a complex, who go to a complex. People in a church who not just will register people in the church, but get volunteers to register other folks.
Let me just say one last thing. Again, we have these nonprofits, and I also work for a nonprofit, Christian Relief Services, and we just bought a property over in Huntington that will be rent controlled for the next 40 years, and it is 113 units, I think, and it's all going to be for low-income folks and for handicapped homeless as well. 30 units are going to be in there for handicapped homeless. So there are, and that's working with the county, Fairfax County, with the lending from the Fairfax County Housing Authority. So the county is doing a lot in this regard, and they're working with the nonprofit sector. So there is a lot of movement, but we do need to, hold all of our feet to the fire to continue to push for low-income housing. So we have opportunity for everybody, for the whole spectrum. We want our community to be inclusive. We want to include everybody that doesn't, that's working 3 jobs and doesn't make a lot of money. To my new neighbor, Rich Priebus, who's the chief of staff for our new president. So we want everybody to be welcome, right? We're going to try that. Okay, Adriana is our last question.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Price.
Hi, I'm actually Susan Grunder, and I'm the Director of Social Ministry at Good Shepherd Catholic Church. And most of my questions have already been asked, and Ms. Price, I hate to follow after her. She was forceful. But I actually have a couple of suggestions for folks who are looking for things to do or organizations that can assist, particularly in terms of the ICE rates, and then I also have a question. So the first thing is Holy Family Catholic Church in Dale City is hosting a Know Your Rights seminar on Saturday, February 18th. I popped the information on Senator Surovell's Facebook page, but it's really designed for folks to go and find out how to handle themselves during an ICE raid, what their rights are. So that's February 18th from 1:30 to 3:30. Delegate Krizek has been great about mentioning a lot of our community partners here in the area. I urge you, if you are interested in assisting folks who may be facing, who are undocumented, who may be facing crisis, to volunteer at organizations like UCM's Progresso Center, which pushes for folks to obtain citizenship. They are always looking for volunteers. Also, I wanted to point out that Fairfax County's Faith, Community, and Actions, for the lady who asked about hate speech and who is afraid to go to her synagogue, in March, Faith, Communities, and Action is having a program, a united response to hate speech and crime, on Sunday, March 26th at 3 p.m. And you can find most of this information on Stork's website and through his emails, so pay attention to all of that. And then my question to you is something that hasn't been brought up by everybody else. All my other questions were brought up by all of our wonderful folks here. I wanted to ask, what are you all doing in terms of the state response to the opioid crisis? I really think here on the Route 1 corridor, it's something that we're certainly dealing with. It's being dealt with in all pockets of Virginia, and I wanted to know what your response has been to that.
Well, that has been a great response. In this big budget here, there's a lot of money for that, and it's been a bipartisan effort, I must say. We actually have a delegate, John Bell, who's a colleague of mine, who represents Loudoun County, and his son has been a victim of using, I'm not sure if it's heroin, but he's been addicted, and so this is a big problem. I mean, it's hitting everybody, delegates, families. There's another delegate actually who had a parent who has problems. So we do have a lot of money in the budget for this. I'm trying to look it up. I have something on my, I think I have some information about it in my report that you probably have ran out of. So let's see. Here, Scott can talk about it.
Yeah, so, as part of my law practice, I've actually had 2 opposing parties die of opioid addictions or overdoses in the last 12 months. One guy made over $1 million a year, addicted to prescription drugs, died. His 19-year-old wife, don't get me started, died about 3 or 4 months before that. And I'm seeing this a lot in my law practice. We passed a bill to make it easier to dispense naloxone. Naloxone is the drug that they give out to folks when they're overdosing. It allows more people to be trained, and I think we have some more money for that too. But the one thing I'll say, we passed the bill last year to make it easier for people who witness overdoses to call the police and not be prosecuted. A lot of times what happens is you have users that are using together, and somebody will OD, and the people that are there don't want to call the police because they don't want to get arrested and charged themselves. And we passed a law that gives them immunity if they call. Unfortunately, the Fairfax County Commonwealth Attorney has refused to recognize that and has been prosecuting them anyway. And you might want, if you're concerned about that issue, you might want to call it right to the Commonwealth Attorney and ask him to start being a little more compassionate when it comes to these issues. And the last thing I'll say about the opioid situation is I really hope that everybody out there remembers this situation the next time there's an opioid or some other kind of drug crisis in the minority community. Because we had an opioid crisis in America back in the 80s, mainly in the African American community, the crack epidemic. And basically we over-criminalized everything. And now you got a lot of people that are locked up in jail, mandatory minimums, or very small amounts of drugs, while the powdered drugs that the non-African American community is using never really got criminalized in the same way. And this opioid crisis going on now is affecting everybody, and so now the system, I think, is being very responsive to it. But just remember this today, the next time this happens, whether it's 10 or 20 years from now, and there's some new synthetic drug out there, and it's only affecting part of the community. Drugs are an often awful scourge in our society in a lot of ways, but you know, I've always believed that sort of treatment and prevention is a lot more effective than just locking people up and punishing people with massive sentences. So that there's also actually a bill out there to make it a crime. I think they want to make it a felony murder for one user to give heroin or opioids to another user who ODs and dies. And that's not a solution I agree with.
Against that.
Yeah, Delegate Krizek said he voted against it. It's coming over to our chamber, but I just don't believe that creating lots of criminal consequences for this stuff is going to solve any problems. And I think we need to focus on treatment, things like this naloxone, prevention, things like that. So that's kind of where I stand on all that. So, we already answered your question, but
be a short one.
You can take it up with us afterwards, Satish. We told everybody we were going to.
It's for everybody's benefit, not for me.
Let's talk individually with you right after.
Yeah.
Okay.
We have another town hall. We have another town hall at 1 o'clock.
You can address that at the town hall.
I just also want to thank, I didn't mention my deputy legislative aide, who I think left, but he was holding the microphone. Oh, there he is. Yeah, I was looking back there. Brian Esty. Brian's been a big help to me this year. If you get a letter from me, he probably helped write it with my input. But appreciate Brian. Supervisor Stork also, and Brian helped set all this up today, so thank Brian. Supervisor Stork wanted me to also tell everybody that he's doing his office hours today from 12:30 to 2 o'clock across the street. So if you want to go talk to him about some of the things you just talked with us, he's right across the street starting at 12:30. Here, Adam wants to say a few words.
Yeah, just to thank you everyone for bearing with us for so long a meeting, and we enjoy hearing from you. It helps us do our jobs better. I did just want to mention, if you want to continue the conversation, if you did not sign in and did not receive an email from us, feel free to sign in. Chris, I don't know if you have more sheets or I have a pad for you. If you want us to follow us on social media, at Adam Ebbin, at Krizek for Virginia, or Krizek for VA, at S. Surovell. And we're also all on Facebook, whether it's Paul Krizek for Virginia, Facebook.com Surovell, or Facebook.com Ebbin Campaign. And perhaps the most important is that Progress Virginia broadcasts the committee hearings now. Progress Virginia, if you Google them. Live streams them, I should say. And then also the House and Senate are also live streamed, which you can Google. So thanks everyone for being here today.
Yeah, I'll be last here. Thank you all for coming. I do want to remind everybody, and I do get a little hyper-partisan, and I apologize because I know not everybody in here is a Democrat. There's a lot of independents. In fact, more people are independent, I think, in Virginia than anything. We represent all of you, and I try to work across the aisle, and I try to find commonalities where we can work together. And there are a lot of good folks down there on both sides of the aisle that are trying their hardest, and I do appreciate everybody. Thank you all for coming. Thank you.